All right, everybody, can you hear me? You guys hear me? Okay, perfect. All right, we're running a little late, so I'm going to try and get us back on track today. Thanks for being here. I think we're going to talk about emergency response and preparedness. My name is Trish. I work for Arch Insurance. We're a casualty insurance company, global carrier. I have 0 customers in Colorado, which is hilarious, because I've spent my 35-year career in construction risks and safety here in Colorado for the most part. But now I get to get on an airplane all the time, so my friends over here from DIA probably see me wandering around in the airport on a regular basis. My background really started on a Superfund site up at the Eagle Mine, which is not where any safety professional should start. It was really interesting, and then I went to work for a contractor from there. Got in the insurance industry, spent about 15 years on the broker side, worked at Denver Zoo for a while, which was, talk about crisis management, that's the place where you get to practice that. Managed Colorado Safety Association as a nonprofit safety training organization for about 6 years, and now I'm over at Arch. So I've sat all around this round table in multiple different positions. So thanks for being here. I just want to start with a couple of quotes, and the first one is, never let a good crisis go to waste. What does that say to you? What does that mean to anyone here in the room? Learn from it, right? Don't just respond. Come up with some learning actions from it. There's no better opportunity for a leader to prove themselves than in a crisis, right? That's really when the rubber meets the road, and are you prepared? Or are you just going to fall apart? And some people have both situations. It really depends on what the crisis is, I think. And then I like the phrase, that crisis in Chinese is composed of 2 characters, which one means danger and one means opportunity. So there's the crisis, but there's also the opportunity to respond well and to improve. Just keeping in mind, though, when you're in the middle of a crisis, it's a little bit too late to develop a plan. So if you're not prepared, you're going to be just sort of, responding as you can as you go through it. Why do airlines do the safety briefing at the beginning of every flight? So that you see what to do in the event of an emergency, right? How many of you pay attention to that? All the safety people in the room, right? Dave raises his hand. I pay attention to it. I frequently like to sit in the exit row because I feel like I'm the best person in the exit row because I'm a safety professional. But I see people on their phones, they're like reading, they got their headphones in, nobody pays attention unless sometimes Southwest Airlines makes it funny. But really, you respond as you've been trained. That's the whole purpose for the safety briefing, is to somehow put in people's minds what to do in the event of a crisis. And that's really why we need to plan. I can tell you when I worked at the zoo, they have drills. I would say zoos are one of the most crisis-prepared organizations I've ever worked with. And I've worked with lots of zoos, not just Denver. But they have drills. Like, what do you do if an animal gets out? What do you do if someone falls in an animal exhibit? And I'd be sitting in my office typing, and they'd be running into my office and slamming into the locker and getting out the guns and running out to do a drill. They call them code reds in Denver. They plan with real guns. They prepare. They drill with the weapons they're going to use in the event of a crisis. They might be a dart, like a sedative gun, might be a real weapon. They decided to start doing those drills with toy weapons at one point, because they thought, well, it'd be less risky, it's just a drill. What I observed is that people were treating the toy weapons like what? Like toys, right? So what happens if you plan with your weapon that's a toy and you're treating it as a toy? When you get a real weapon in your hands, what are you going to do? Accidentally shoot a coworker or yourself, or you got to plan the way you're going to respond. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. So some of the things that we deal with in the construction industry, right, is we have constantly changing hazards, which makes it an interesting environment to work in. but it also makes it challenging. When we were doing the emergency action plans out at the Fitzsimmons Army Medical site, we were building all the medical buildings out there. One of the things we observed is as the building goes up, if you're a vertical contractor, right, it changes on a regular basis. Your exit route might not be the same tomorrow as it is today. Your safe muster point might not be the same. Your access to the project for emergency responders might not be the same. That makes it challenging for planning, but it also makes it a continuous process. So it's like continuous improvement. It's like a safety management plan. You have to manage it and you have to change it as your hazards and risks change. Crisis events. Define a crisis event for your organization. Is it a collapse? The building falls down? I mean, remember the Hard Rock Cafe Hotel in New Orleans when the floors collapsed during construction? You know, we've got the bridge over in Parker that collapsed during construction. I can't remember, was it Lincoln or somewhere down there? You know, just all kinds of things. Is it a trench collapse? Is it an overdose? We were talking about employee overdose and suicide prevention this morning. What does a crisis look like for you? Anybody have a different crisis that you would want to suggest? Forest fire, okay. Whether you started or not, you might have to evacuate, right? My son's a firefighter in Winter Park, so that actually, that fire in Granby and Estes Park that met over the Continental Divide was really scary, right? What's another crisis that might happen?
Tornado, in an example that I know of.
A tornado, okay. So you have to evacuate the project site. All right, anything else? Okay, so a buried utility, you've got the arc flash. You also may have a disruption to local businesses. You may have a local hospital on that circuit that suddenly they're having to go to backup generators, or loss of revenue for businesses around the area. And what can that lead to? In addition to the crisis of responding, you might have the reputation piece of it, right? So reputation risk management is also part of that. So the consequence of not being prepared is that, you know, your injuries, there can be costly delays, you can end up with reputation risk, and it can impact your long-term success. So we'll talk a little bit about how to plan for some of these things. So common characteristics of a crisis is it can be a really rude awakening, right? Nobody expects it to happen, which is why it might be a crisis situation. It's never going to happen to me, it's going to happen to someone else, right? Rapid speed and event escalation. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the elements that lead to rapid event escalation and the word getting out on your crisis these days? Social media, right? There's the old phrase, I used to have it in my presentation, says it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. How long does it actually take? Not even 30 seconds, right? It's like the speed of light because everybody has a camera and everybody is an on-the-ground reporter suddenly when something starts to happen. They're putting it on their Instagram, they're putting it on Facebook Live, people are videotaping, dash cams. There's so many sources of information anymore that just the word gets out immediately. It might be panic-inducing. It can be scary to be involved in a crisis situation. People get a little shaky. You have to stop and think about how you're going to prepare and respond. In that case, people may act irrationally. One of the things that happens, what is the statistic for rescuers going into a confined space and becoming a casualty? Unknown? I mean, it could be like 70% of the people. Does that sound like a, what is it? 60%. So someone goes down and your thought is, I have to get my coworker out of this situation, and you run in, overcome by the same situation. Now they have to rescue you before they can get to your coworker, and it just escalates, right? That's an example of irrational behavior because you're acting in the moment and it seems rational, which is where some of your training can come in to help circumvent some of that. Chaos in management communications. Many people think that the CEO or the president should be the voice of the organization in the event of an incident. How many of you agree with that? Maybe, maybe not, right? It depends on how clear-headed that person is. I still remember the mining accidents from years gone by, and Kristin, you probably remember some of these, where the CEO's like, oh, these people are, you know, they made bad decisions, or what, they're like blaming the worker for the mine explosion when they're all dying in the mine, right? Or the BP thing, I just want my life back, right? People respond in ways that paints the organization in a bad light because they're under stress. Maybe your CEO or your president, the leader of your company, needs to be focusing on reaching out to stakeholders and managing the business side of the crisis without being the spokesperson for the organization. So something to think about. It doesn't mean you're minimizing them. It means you're putting them in the area where they're going to have strength and not jeopardize the response. And we just talked a little bit about the omnipresent media. So there are all kinds of acronyms. We'll talk about the 3 Ps and the 4 phases and whatever. These are just convenient ways to sort of package a crisis response. You have to come up with your own, what are your phases of a crisis and what is your acronym? Is it the 4 Cs of communication or the 3 Ps of prevention, preparedness, whatever, planning? You know, coming up with your own sort of language that describes how you want to manage a crisis in your organization. This is really hard because they're videotaping this. I usually wander all over the room. She told me I had to stay up here. So one of them is crisis identification and prevention. Then you kind of get into the management phase. How are you going to communicate, and what does recovery look like? So as we move into crisis identification, you have to decide, what does a crisis look like for your organization? Is it a fatality? Is it a collapse? Is it failure to get a bond? Is it losing your ability to bid work? I worked with a contractor in Texas. They were not managing their fleet very well. They did a bunch of work for Atmos Energy. The DOT in Texas pulled their operating license for their fleet, which put them at risk of losing their entire contract with Atmos Energy. That's a crisis, right? That's something you have to respond to, and you have to have a plan for, oh no, what are we going to do now? So a crisis can look different for all different organizations. So, you know, how are you going to respond under those different activities? And depending on the crisis, you might have a different team responding to it. Is it loss of life, serious injury, a building collapse, allegations of dishonest business practices, theft, fraud, or cyber breach? And understanding that a crisis can evolve over time, and you may be pulled into something that's not your fault. And how do you respond to that? I had a contractor in Colorado. They were driving on E470, and they lost a pack of hydroseed off the top of their truck, and it hit the ground and exploded into this giant blue cloud of hydroseed and fertilizer. You couldn't see anything. It completely obscured the view of the car following them that had a dash cam. Fox News picked it up. Blinded by blue dust, the mystery powder. They're talking about all of this, you know, nobody crashed. It was a load securement issue. But as the story evolved, they ended up standing in front of the landfill on Highway 93 talking about how trucks coming into the landfill will lose their load. The landfill on Highway 93 had zero to do with this incident, but they became front and center on this news story because the news media is like, what else can lead to a crisis on the highway? So suddenly they're responding to something that wasn't even of their making. We had another contractor that responded to an incident, and they were administering first aid, and the dash cam was videotaping the truck with the logo on it, as if the news made it look like they were responsible for the accident when really they were just being good Samaritans. So there's all kinds of things that happen that you then have to be nimble enough to say, how are we going to respond to this? And having a plan in place accelerates your response and makes it a little more consistent. So one of the things you can do is you can have a risk assessment. There are different kinds of risk assessment programs out there and different matrices that you can use. I like the red-green, the green, yellow, red kind of version that says, what's the likelihood? Uh-oh, I just lost my PowerPoint. All right, that was weird. What's the likelihood that it's going to happen? How severe is it going to be? And what's the risk matrix? So you can go from low, medium to extreme, and it can give you a little bit of where to do planning. I worked with an electrical contractor in Texas who used this kind of a matrix to plan their project. So they would look at the phases of the project, identify the work that was going to be done, the severity and the likelihood of an incident on that work, and they would staff their safety team on the project based on the risk that was coming up. So instead of having full-time, huge safety team when they're doing site prep, they actually ramped it up when they were doing electrical work or when they're, setting the top beam or whatever it is. You can kind of look at the project and plan ahead based on the risk profile of what you're doing. So that can be one way to do a risk assessment. That helps you identify where you need to focus your energy, because how many of you have unlimited time? I don't see any hands raising on that question, right? We're all really busy. Many of us are multitasking. There's another way that you can look if you want to expand your view beyond safety and look at organizational risk. I encourage health and safety professionals to understand as much about your organizational risk as you can. How is your insurance structured? Are you self-insured? Is it guaranteed cost, meaning the insurance company pays first dollar? Do you have a huge deductible? You pay the first 100,000, the first 20,000, the first 15. What does it look like so that you understand kind of the risks for your organization? So there are people risks. We focus a lot in that category as health and safety professionals. There might be market risks. So this is things that can be competitors moving in. It can be things like market share, trade barriers. Sometimes this can be supply chain issues. I think some people are dealing with supply chain. I remember years ago when the polymer used in some of the asphalt products was in short supply and some of the paving contractors were not able to complete their jobs. Maybe you bid a job ahead of time and then the supply chain changes and the cost to build the project goes up dramatically, but you're tied to the bid you submitted a year ago. Those are the kinds of things that can happen. Those also can fall into the financial risk category. Operational risk, sabotage, transportation, machinery breakdown, things like that. And then strategic risks, how are you planning and what does your strategic plan look like? I've been through 5 mergers and acquisitions. That's a strategic risk, right? And how do you retain your employees when you're doing something like that? I think that happens a lot as well. So there are different ways to treat the risk. You can avoid it. What does risk avoidance look like? Sleeping all day. Sleeping all day is one way to avoid it. What did you say? Okay, so subcontracting work is, I would say, more like a transferring the risk to someone else, but that's a good point. Risk avoidance would be, we're not going to do this work. That's actually can be hard to do, right? But you might substitute a less hazardous product for a more hazardous product, right? So if you avoid it, you're not doing it. Contractors I see that engage in risk avoidance, it might be, we have expanded so much that we're operating outside of our expertise or our ability to do the work really well. So we're going to contract and we're going to stay on the trenching side and not do the concrete, right? That might be a strategic decision for risk avoidance. Risk retention, that's where you're retaining the risk, you're going to pay the claim. That might be a captive, that might be a deductible where you pay the certain amount of money. You're going to retain that risk and it's going to hit your balance sheet if it happens. Risk transfer, you might hire a subcontractor to do the more risky work. Maybe you're going to hire someone to do the confined space entry or the trenching and excavation or the contractor I just met with the diving for caissons and doing work on dams, those underwater welding guys. That's something I would want to transfer, quite frankly, because it's high risk, right? So that might be something that you do. Insurance is classic risk transfer. You buy insurance, I work for an insurance company. You have a claim, we pay you, or we pay the person who had the loss. Maybe it's the car you hit or whatever it is. That's risk transfer. And then risk reduction is where a lot of us as health and safety professionals live. We try and mitigate that risk by safety training, using PPE, monitoring, isolating the work, all the things that we do to try and reduce the likelihood that that risk is going to be catastrophic. So that's on the prevention side. When we start getting into the management side, that's where we want to have a plan. That's where you do that what-if scenario, you do that risk assessment, you understand what could possibly happen and how are we going to respond to it ahead of time. So one of the best things you can have in your crisis management plan is the first hour response checklist. How are we going to handle the first hour? What happens in the first hour? Anyone? Chaos. That was on one of my first slides, right? What else happens? Emergency medical response. That first hour response checklist, you know, I mentioned where are you going to send the first responders? What if the person calling 911 doesn't know that the gate moved from one side of the project to the other? If they don't have a plan, your first responders respond to the wrong side of the project, and what happens? You have a delay, right, in getting them to the right place. And that can be life-threatening for someone who falls. We had a contractor they had a guy fall, it was at 9th in Colorado. They were building a building. The guy fell off the building as the ambulance was driving by the site. He did a U-turn and pulled in. The guy saw him fall. I mean, that's like the best response you could have, right? Well, better would be not having the guy fall off the building. But it was kind of interesting. He knew exactly where to go. But when we were building Flatiron Crossings up in Broomfield, that project was changing on a daily basis depending on what buildings were going up, where the trenches were, and things like that. And getting emergency responders to a fairly rural area without an address can be challenging. So you have to plan ahead of time. You have to have a spokesperson. You don't want to go to the media and say, yeah, we had a guy fall off the building and he's really seriously hurt. That's not always the best phrasing, but you can tell the media, this is your gathering point. We will be back to you in 20 minutes to give you an update, and then do that. And don't say no comment. Just say, this is what we know right now. We're in the middle of responding to this. We will let you know what's happening. Kind of buy yourself some time. It's called a buy time statement. Having some media training ahead of time can help you with that process as well. One of the contractors I was working with, I'm starting to sound like I'm not a very good safety professional. All these catastrophes that happen. They had an accident where 2 haul trucks hit each other and one of the drivers was ejected. They had changed the travel route, you know, the haul road direction, and one of the trucks went the wrong way, hit another one. The guy wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He was on the road. The owner of the company is trying to call his wife. The phone on his belt kept ringing. I'm like, you got to stop calling his wife because you're calling him. He had the phone. But then the helicopters come by. So what do? The media is going to take a picture of this body and the spouse is going to see it on the news, right? So you got to think about, how are we going to secure the area, cover him up, do whatever to prevent that kind of thing from happening. So a lot of times that first hour response checklist, having emergency contacts, making sure the phone is for the right person, you're not calling the person who got injured, right? How are you going to notify stakeholders? How are you going to notify a family member, for example? Are you going to call a spouse and say, your loved one is in the hospital, it's critical? They're going to get in the car highly agitated and possibly crash on the way to the hospital, right? Or are you going to send someone to escort them? Or send an Uber so that you can give them a ride? What are you going to do for that kind of communication? Injury versus fatality, incident reports, evacuation plans, company fact sheets, communication plans, all of these things come into play in your emergency. Media tips are important. Whatever happens in the media, it's kind of like, it's the opposite of Vegas, right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, maybe it's the same. What happens in the media stays in the media, right? And anytime something similar happens down the road, they're going to pull your story up and say, yeah, this is like what happened 10 years ago to this company, and it rehashes your incident because someone else had a similar thing. So managing that dialogue as best you can will serve you in the long term as well as in that first hour.
And that happens all the time. A lot of people just don't recognize it.
It happens all the time, and people don't
Texas City comes up every time there's a refinery incident. When did that happen?
That's right, Texas City. Yep, it does. It happens all the time. So, yeah.
We as professionals need to be planning for.
Right. So the better you can manage your communication and the story that gets in the media to begin with, the less likely people are going to be reliving your emergency forever, right? So that's a good point. And especially if you're in a high profile situation. So Denver International Airport, pretty much a media magnet, right? Anything that happens, they're going to show Denver. I think a good story about Denver was the city wanting to pay their TSA and air traffic controllers during the shutdown because they recognized that they're key members. Those are the good kinds of stories that get out, as opposed to every time there's a plane crash, they're going to show DIA and say, oh, although we haven't really had a crash at the airport, have we? Yeah, a long time. So those are the kinds of things that can happen. You want to build a team. I keep looking at my watch to make sure I don't go too far over. So building a team, you want to bring people with a wide range of experience on your team. Someone from the field, someone from operations, someone from safety, someone from finance. Get a broad range of expertise on your team. They can help you inform your program. People need to be able to work in a team setting, right? They need to have confidence. We tend to pick competent people based on experience. We don't always measure how confident they are in making the call to shut down work or, to make a decision. Competence and confidence are not necessarily, they don't necessarily go hand in hand. So we need to be looking at the confidence of the people as well as the competence that they have when we put them on a team. Perform well under pressure. Again, that might not be the CEO or the president. They might be completely overwhelmed. It might not be the best friend of the person who was injured. So, you kind of have to think about who's going to be on the team, and is the team project-based or is it corporate? That could be a different team as well. So your team leader, your president, you might have legal counsel. One of the things you have to consider when you're doing an incident investigation is how the incident is going to be controlled and communicated. If it's something that can become a claim against your company down the road from a third party, you may not want to be putting out a lot of information in writing and on social media, because then the claimant attorneys are going to use that. It's discoverable. So you might want to hire someone like Kristin from Phillips to say, help us lead this investigation so that it becomes attorney-client work product, right? What's the term? Yeah. Work product. So that she's directing the investigation, right? Yeah. I've worked with lots of safety professionals over the years, and what is one of our favorite things to do as a result of an accident? What do you do with your peers when you have an incident on your project site? You share, right? This is what happened to us, and this is what we learned, and it goes out in an email to 5,000 people. That's discoverable. So you may have to sort of wait on the lessons learned communications. Don't send it to me as your insurance carrier. Your email to me is discoverable. Your broker, it's discoverable. You just have to make sure that you have a plan for controlling, I would say protecting your investigation so that you're protecting your company from liability. And that's a very important piece of this.
As part of that, I
Mm-hmm.
would share, because I've been with a number of different companies and we've had severe events occur, that we couldn't share that information directly with the workforce because of the concerns over what would get out and how it might be misconstrued and
Yep.
undiscoverable. The company needs to have a plan for how they are going to work with the trade partners, with the labor force,
Right.
to talk about things in a way that they understand that we can't share all of the details, but here's what you as the labor force needs to know in order to protect yourself from a similar kind of event.
Right. Okay.
You're going to
Yep.
have to figure out how to do that very quickly, because all it's going to take is 2 or 3 days, and labor is going to be just all over everybody about the fact that nobody will tell us what's going on so that we can take care of ourselves. It paints the wrong picture
Right.
in the eyes of those who really want to know how to be safe.
So, to sort of paraphrase the comment really, and it's a good one, because we think about telling the media no comment, that looks like you're trying to hide something. You can't just share all the lessons learned with your workforce and your trade partners either if you're trying to protect the investigation. But not communicating with them at all sends the wrong message, and you lose an opportunity to help them stay safe, to help them be engaged, to help them understand that you're thinking about them, you will be communicating with them, phrasing the information to them in a way that achieves an objective without giving away the farm in the process, right? So that's a good point, because you do have stakeholders.
The more severe it is,
Yeah, right.
it could be years before.
It could be years, yeah.
I know of one that's still ongoing, and it's at least 10 years old.
Yeah, I
They
mean,
still have not provided enough detail to the workers doing the exact same task.
to
that
understand,
are at the exact same risk,
right.
and they've tried to correct those things without giving away the farm.
Right. So we can, our need to communicate can also sabotage our investigation. Protecting our investigation can sabotage our need to communicate. And you have to have a plan to sort of balance those competing priorities, right? Which is important. And that's not easy to do. And the more you talk about it, the more you do tabletop exercises and plan for it, the more successful you'll be.
There's a level of rumor control as well.
Rumor control,
Just,
right, yep.
A dialogue isn't out there on its own that's worse than
Right.
before being shared.
Yeah.
So it at least controls it back into somewhat of truth.
Right. That rumor control is like, if you don't have some kind of a story, people are going to make it up, right? And it may not be accurate. Yeah.
It's going to change it more.
And it's like the telephone game. Everybody has a different take on it. And as it spreads around, it grows. Final point, make sure your receptionist or the person answering the phone knows what's going on, right? That's a key person. And a lot of times we don't elevate those people to a level of importance because it's just the receptionist or whatever. That's a really important person because they might be the first line of defense for people calling the company. Stakeholder outreach, we've just talked about that quite a bit. Having some messaging and roles for handling the media, the buy time statement, getting back to them, not just coming out with a no comment. Verifying facts, and then documentation and communication tools. Those are all really parts of the communication. And I think the slides will be shared with you, hopefully. If not, anyone wants them, I will share them with you as well. Conducting drills, again, we respond as we've been trained. If you haven't been trained, you're not going to be responding well. Employees with over 10 employees, you must have an emergency action plan. How are you going to be doing that? How are you going to document that? Reinforcing training, regular drills again. Drill, baby, drill, right? You're going to want to do that at your company and practice your plan. Practical training activities. In my experience, the way we do safety training is not always transferable to the field. Sitting in here and listening to me show you some PowerPoint slides doesn't give you the ability to go out and actually execute on the plan. It can spark some ideas. It can start the conversation, right? Reading about something is not the same as learning how to do something. So you can't just read it and be proficient. You have to practice. So when we do training, have practical training. Have people put on their fall protection harness. Show them where to hook the lanyard for the anchor point. Do hands-on training. I can't tell you how many times I've done competent person training. Let's talk about scaffolds. This is your base plate. This is where the pins go. This is what you need for guardrails, whatever it is. And then you go out in the field and none of it is happening because the process of putting it up in the environment is so different than the classroom. There's no relationship between the slides and reality. We need to do more hands-on, practical training, skill-based training, not just information sharing, sage on stage, talking at people, right? So getting out and teaching them how to do it. Simulate real-world challenges if you can't do it in the field. Try and do as much in the field as you can. And then measuring and improving your readiness. Track metrics. Identify leading indicators as well as lagging. We measure what happened and we try and prevent it from happening again. It's hard to measure something that doesn't happen. But you can come up with leading indicators. One of the contractors I've worked with said, a leading indicator for safety in our organization is the number of supervisors who are safety trained supervisors. A leading indicator is how early we put stairs in the project to reduce the use of ladders. A leading indicator is dash cams in the vehicles because we know people are going to be driving better if they have that. Those are things that set you up for success, and you should be measuring those and preparing to prevent a crisis with those kinds of things, as well as measuring incidents and accidents and trying to get your crystal ball out and say, we had 5 falls this year, the 6th one could probably be a fatality. If you listen to some of the data from the Construction Safety Research Alliance, they say there's no relationship between that data and what actually happens in the world. It seems like we can make a connection. It's not statistically significant, right? So we need to use good data, and we need to measure and improve our readiness. I talked about the impact of a crisis on your reputation, how it can come back to haunt you forever. Poor response can amplify that kind of damage. You have to be resilient, and you have to influence your social media presence and understand how that can affect you. Assess damage and priority. Once the incident is over, that's when you start to look at evaluating the situation, identifying repairs, coming up with corrective actions. I will say, if the result of your incident investigation is that it was human error and you stop there, you might as well not do an investigation. I can tell you when I worked at the zoo, there was a zookeeper that was killed by a jaguar. The media statement said, she made a mistake, it was human error. Yeah, it was human error. It's always going to be human error. Why? Why did the error happen? Was it the system? Was it the setup? Was it the process? Was it the training or lack of? Why did that person make that mistake at that time? That's where you start digging deeper and not stopping at the person and fixing the worker. You got to fix the process. You have to understand the context, right? So when you start assessing damage and priorities, look deeper from your first analysis and say, okay, why really did this happen? Clear client communication. Make sure you're talking to your stakeholders, your bonding company, your bankers, the people you do business with, as well as your owners and GCs and subcontractors and whoever else that you're working with. And then having your plan that's going to prioritize safety, operation, and efficiency is going to help you recover more quickly. So some of the key takeaways: Have some roles and responsibilities identified. It doesn't have to be a 50-page manual. It probably shouldn't be a 50-page manual, right? You want to have it be actionable and nimble. Having good communication channels, ongoing training and drills are critical, and then have a plan review. Did it work? If it didn't work, adjust it. That's that first statement is, never waste a good crisis, right? You have to learn from it. And finally, I would say our contingency plan was the winery was open and the wine was good. So it's my favorite sign, actually. You have a question?
I just had a comment about one of the things that I have found really helpful, and I'm on the response side of it as a counselor, but is communication with the family. I think that a lot of times it can be hard for families to know how to talk about this with each other, and sometimes
Yep.
the family member most impacted, it doesn't want to talk about it, is done, we've been doing that, might have to work extra hours, all of that. So I have found that the family giving the team member a letter to send, share with their family, just acknowledging what's happened and the commitment to safety, and just some talking points or some family self-care points about what's kind of normal and helpful in going through a situation can go a long way.
Right.
To facilitating the conversation, but also to the healing that happens when you leave the workplace.
Right. And what is your name?
My name is Bev.
Bev? So what Bev was talking about is having a communication plan for the family, right? How can they talk about this amongst themselves? How can they share it internally? How can they process it? How do they deal with the fear? We typically forget about the family, but when there's an injury or a fatality, the family is affected. They lose a partner. And if they don't lose a partner, that partner may not be able to do what they normally can do. Maybe they can't drive the kids to school or mow the lawn or help cook with meal prep. Maybe you as a family member become a caretaker in addition to your other responsibilities of being a family member. So it's really important not only to understand what the impact on the family, give them some tools to cope, and understand that counseling and support can also fall into that.
I think it's a great point because a lot of emergency action plans and response employers forget to put that
Yep.
counselor in there.
Right.
And encourage everybody to, because depending on the situation, the grief counseling can come and also talk to employees, employers, and also be able with them.
Right. So don't forget the family.
Don't
Yeah.
forget about the grief counseling
Yep.
in any type of agreement.
Don't just have an inward-facing plan, right? Think about all the people who are affected. That's a really good point, and I appreciate you. Dave?
So, remember, some of these crises that occur aren't going to be solved in mere days or weeks. I know of a Tony had mentioned 10 years. I know of a contractor who has one. It's ongoing for months and months and months and months and months and months and months. And you have to be able to manage the conversations that are released during that period of time as well, so they do not bring damaging thoughts or comments or to your reputation.
Right.
As well, because the organizations, the guys want to know what happened.
Right.
There's only so much you can say because there's ongoing investigations or litigation or investigate whatever. So that's a big thing to try to manage as well.
Right.
Because the gossip's going to start. People are going to start, hey, how come we're not here?
And that,
This is
yeah,
what I think is just like that.
right.
Then they're, it can get really ugly.
It can, so the comment is that the length of time that these crises can go on can really expand the need to have a consistent long-term communication plan to manage the changing nature of the investigation as new information comes out, people's need, and it gets back to what we were talking about before, is those competing priorities of communication versus protecting your investigation. And so we talk about the first hour, but we need to talk about the first year, right, or the first 5 years, and have a long-term plan for managing the communication. And we are now 5 minutes over. but pretty good considering we started 10 minutes late. Thank you so much for your participation.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. All right, so to start this whole thing off, so the Pope is finished having lunch. He comes over to his limousine, and he looks at the driver and he says, "What is the chance that you would let me drive today? I really want to drive. I never get to drive." Chauffeur's like, "I don't know what to do. It's the Pope." So at that point, then he says, next thing you know, the Pope is driving. The Pope's taking him, he hasn't been really driving for a long time. So right off the bat, he's on the sidewalk, goes through, speeding a little bit. Next thing you know, he runs a stop sign. Police car's right there, pulls him over. Police officer walks up to the front of the limousine, and he immediately gets to the door and looks and is like, "I'll be right back." Comes back into the squad car. He gets on his radio and goes, "Hey, Chief, you got your ears open?" He's like, "What?" And he's like, "We need to talk." And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I pulled over somebody I shouldn't have pulled over." He goes, "Who is it? Is it a mayor? Is it like an athlete? Who is it?" He's like, "I don't know. It's not those." He goes, "Well, what do you mean?" And he goes, "Who'd you pull over?" And he goes, "God." He goes, "God?" He goes, "How do you know it's God? What does he look like?" He goes, "I don't know, but the Pope is the chauffeur." So this is kind of a statement of what we're talking about today is stop the drop. This is stuff that has implications that could affect not only your livelihood, but your life. So the message here is this is stuff to avoid having to meet God or what you believe in your faith. So with that, we're going to go right to the next slide.
So I'm Zane. I work for Haselden Construction. I'm a safety manager over there. Haselden's been around over 50 years now in Colorado, founded by Jim and Millie Haselden. We're now on the second and third generation of folks from that family working at Haselden. Our mission, since 1973, we've always operated on family values. Our founder, Jim Haselden, always wanted us to be a great builder, whether the project is $500,000 or $300 million. It never mattered. We always wanted to provide the same quality and care to our clients and to everyone who worked on our job sites. So we're guided by our core values. Our team of construction experts works relentlessly to deliver elegant solutions for tough problems, ensuring that we build clients for life. Work in all facets of construction. We've been around in Colorado and across some of these other states bordering us, Wyoming, Montana now, and Nebraska.
And my name is Matt Paull. I'm with GH Phipps. I'm an HSE manager. Roughly, we have about 400 employees. Half are in the field, half are in the office. Shout out to our folks in the back from Phipps. So different departments. Working at Phipps, we touch a lot of the community. That's what's really awesome about working for the contractor, that most of you as well, you work in our industry of supporting the community. We do anything from general contractor, controlling contractor, to as well as subcontractor, trade partner for vertical concrete. So one of the largest jobs we've done is the concrete work over at Mahi Stadium. So working with Turner and Mortensen on that one. Our founder, Mr. Phipps, those that are not rooted into Denver, if you're not native or know the history, Mr. Phipps is one of the original owners of the Denver Broncos. Until Pat Bolin, he was the only non-player in the Ring of Fame for Denver Broncos. Him and his brother and 3 other people brought the Denver Broncos here in 1961. He bought out his brother by 1968, and then by 1982, he sold it. 81, he sold it to Kaiser for 1 year, and then it was taken over by the Pat Bolin after that. He's touched a lot of our legacy in Colorado, and he still lives on. And he made that as part of one of his last gifts. We're 100% employee owned. Next slide.
So, Stop the Drop, what is it? Stop the Drop is an AGC of Colorado. Stop the Drop Task Force is where it was founded. The AGC and OSHA have partnered together to create an alliance with the Inglewood and Denver offices for the Stop the Drop Task Force, which is what all of this was built for. When we founded that task force, we worked with OSHA. In OSHA, you have different programs for participation. You have things for on-site consultation, your OSHA challenge programs for those that want to get that level, your VPP programs, very tough to obtain, very tough to keep, strategic partnership programs, and then alliance programs, things like the OSHA Chase Partnership and the Stop the Drop Alliance. So these are all different programs that contractors can voluntarily participate in with OSHA at any given level to make sure that you are meeting or exceeding any of the OSHA expectations in your industry for your company, or joining one of these alliance programs to help build a better industry for all of us. And that's what we tried to do with Stop the Drop, was make an industry difference on a problem that continues to happen across all of our job sites across the entire country.
Real quickly, before we leave off on the alliance and what this means, is just that you at some point in your career, how many of you are safety professionals in the room? Yeah.
Good half.
So you will be, most likely, it's an honor to be able to be seen as a peer that can join that. So be on the lookout for it. So when somebody taps your shoulder and says, we need your involvement, that's what this is all about. Next slide. Wait for it, wait for it. The suspense, this next slide is great.
I don't know. There it is.
All right, here we go. Stop the Drop. I'm gonna just immediately start. Matt Ogle in the back, please stand up. Matt is the mastermind behind this. We can't thank enough. And it's an honor just to be able to talk about this. This is what Matt envisioned, like he saw the need, we'll talk about that. But with that, there's 10 of us contractors that joined in this pursuit almost 2 years ago. And we'll talk about what the program looked like. But you can see it's got J.E. Dunn, Wyfield, CFC, Hyder, PCL, Beck, Mortensen, A&P, Phipps, PCL, OSHA, and then obviously Haselden.
So campaign information. So these QR codes, they pop up several times throughout the presentation. You can scan those. It takes you right to the link on the AGC of Colorado's website for the Stop the Drop page. So it's the first full week in October. We got fall stand down week earlier in the year. We decided the first full week in October will be Stop the Drop week. So this year it was the 6th through the 10th. We got banners and stickers on there that you can download, you can get printed, you can just print out on 11x17s. On the website there's toolbox talks, English and Spanish, one for every day of the week. You've got videos on there, other educational materials that you can utilize, all sorts of great links on there that you can use to bring Stop the Drop Week to your job sites as a celebration to make a little bit more of safety being fun. It's tough to make safety fun sometimes, and this is a great opportunity to do your own stand downs and have your own fun application of Stop the Drop Week. Oh, come on now, clicker. There we go. So this is that website. When you scan that QR code, it'll take you directly to this website on the AGC of Colorado. Under safety, we've got our own tab right there at the bottom, Stop the Drop. This is the home page for it. Brings up what we just showed you in that previous slide, but then down below it, all your different toolbox talks for all the days of the week to help you bring that out to your sites and educate all of your employees as well as any trade partners that you work with, right? I know some folks in here are GCs, some in here are subcontractors, some it depends on the project, but this is a great opportunity to bring everybody together and educate everyone on some of the ways that you can prevent dropped object injuries on the job sites. So, the objective of Stop the Drop, right? The first objective is to bring awareness to the second leading cause of fatalities and injuries in the construction industry, right? Every year, lots of people get injured, lots of people perish and pass away on the job site from objects coming off of the building or coming from a higher elevation. and crushing or injuring that person on the job site. That's what we all want to avoid. Everybody gets to go home safe at the end of the day. So inform the construction workforce that they're the largest percentage of struck by fatalities are due to dropped objects, right? That's the biggest thing from that kills people on the job sites. It's something simple falling off the building, whether it's a hammer, it's a piece of material, it's a steel beam, it's an impact drill, whatever it is. Those are all examples of objects that come down and take away someone's chances of going home to see their family at the end of the day. Provide that education to ensure struck by hazards are identified and effectively controlled. We all know for the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of emphasis behind fall protection and preventing people from falling to their death on your job sites. But that second leading cause of injury and accidents on the job site, those dropped objects, that's not getting the same traction. And the goal in this, much like the Think Inside the Box trench goals a couple of years ago, is to bring awareness to that so that as an industry we can grow and get better for everybody on the job site. Because if I drop something on the job site from the 7th floor, it's not going to land on me because I'm on the 7th floor. It lands on somebody else. And that's who I affect. So as a team on the job site, whether you're an electrician or a plumber or a roofer or whatever that trade is, we all have to work together to make sure we can prevent injuries from dropped objects. So these are our 4 principles, the 4 key components of preventing dropped objects, right? Tool tethering is number 1. That seems like the simplest thing we can do. Barricading is number 2. Material securement and safe cargo. Dropped objects don't just happen from the 7th floor. They also happen on a truck. They also happen, like we were just talking about in the last one, a box full of hydro seed comes off your truck on the highway. That object doesn't affect anybody who works on your site, but if that lands on the hood of a car behind you, that creates a problem for them. So, tool tethering on the job site to protect people working below you, using barricading, blockading off those areas below work to prevent people from accessing those zones so that no one is put at risk. Material securement when we're flying things with cranes or moving material with forklifts to prevent objects from coming off of there. And then safe cargo transportation across the job site and on and off of the project. So the impact of Stop the Drop. Struck by hazards has been one of the OSHA Fatal 4 since 1994. Fun fact, I was born 1 year before that, so the entirety of my life just about, dropped objects has been one of the Fatal 4. 52,000 struck by falling object OSHA recordables are recorded annually. Based on the 2022 statistics, there was 238 people that lost their lives with something coming down on top of them. 7 of those fatalities in Colorado were from 2015 to the present. So this is a problem in Colorado. We lost 7 folks out of our industry since 2015, and it's tough to find new people to join the industry, as we all know. Come on now. This clicker sure don't like me. Oh, there we go.
So where do we go from this? So this is what you will find by going to AGC's website. It has all the toolbox talks, it has everything, and you're going to start with the kickoff. And so similar to this presentation, you saw it's doing both English and in Spanish so we can present at the same time. That's what these toolbox talks look like at the same time as well. So we have it in English, we have it over in Spanish. And basically the kickoff is just basically what we just went through, what Zane was just talking about. Next slide. All right, check this one out. So inside of here is a tape measure. What this slide is talking about is a 1-pound tape measure fell 50 floors, at which point struck at the base, killed a 50-year-old Gary Anderson drywall delivery while delivering drywall, obviously, and he was not wearing a hard hat. So literally he just brought the material to the job site, was just checking into I imagine, into the trailer to tell him I've got drywall to deliver, and this is what happened. So this stuff is happening. This is probably the most well-known case when we talk about dropped objects. This is the one that usually comes first that you will see on this. Well, you also see in our presentation, we're going to be just showing you, these are actually, you can go to OSHA and you can find anything. Go to establishment search. You can go find the records for this. This is the actual information that OSHA provided on this exact issue, what had happened. 30-foot tape measure fell 50 stories. So, I mean, obviously there's one less person at that dinner table at their Christmas, Thanksgiving, family, everything to celebrate. That's one less person that accidentally fell to the consequences of dropped objects.
We talked in the last presentation about crisis management. This happened at 8:30 in the morning. What's happening at 8:30 in the morning? The rest of the world is going to work, right? That's rush hour time. At 8:30 in the morning in a busy city with 50-foot tall building or 50-story tall buildings, there's a lot of people going to work on the sidewalk right outside of your job site. And it's tragic when it's one of our people, but I guarantee you it's a lot more in the view of the news if it's somebody who's not working on your job site. If that landed on somebody on the sidewalk, that's crisis management that we've got to deal with too. It's not just your people that we got to watch out for. It's everybody working outside of your job site.
Well said. So in relationship, now 3M provided us this information. So we're going to start what this graph is. For you that are further in the back, it's showing blue, red, and yellow. So if you drop an object 25 feet, it's going to bounce 20 feet out. If you drop an object 100 foot out, it's going 220 feet out on the deflection. Now we're up to 200 foot. We're 420 feet outside of where it dropped. So put that in your mindset. Like if something happens and it ricochets, where's it going to go? Up to 420 feet out.
Nope. All right. Well, I figured out this clicker. This is a video that we made as part of the Stop the Drop Task Force. Nope. Alyssa, will you play that video? So we made this video as part of the Stop the Drop Task Force. All the contractors came together, created this video to show some of the impacts of common tools on any job site. When they fall, what happens to a person or to someone that is standing down below that object, whether that impacts them in the shoulder, it hits them in the head. The consequences would be very similar. Stand by for my technical difficulties.
Sir, would you be able to go over to the booth over there and ask them to, yeah, we'll keep going so we don't lose time. All right, next slide.
Okay, so tool tethering, what needs to be secured, right? Any object that you could drop at the end of the day, that's a pretty simple concept to understand, right? How are you going to secure it? Now, not all tool lanyards are created equal, right? I've got one right here from Petzl. He's in a booth across the way. This is good for up to 5 kilograms. Do you know what 5 kilograms is in pounds?
No, sir.
Okay, well, you got a guess?
7?
7? I mean, you're getting close. Anybody know what 5 kilograms is in pounds? Yeah, roughly 10 to 12 pounds, right? So this is going to support 12-pound object, 10-pound object. If I drop it, it stays right here, right? I don't lose my car keys that often. That's not why it's here, but that's awesome. 10 pounds is great, but what if I need something a little bit more heavy duty? Now I got to get an upgraded lanyard. Now when I'm upgrading my lanyard, the other thing to keep in mind, if I tie something that weighs 30 pounds to me and I'm sitting on a steel beam tied to that beam and I accidentally drop a 30-pound object off the side of the beam and it's hooked to my hip, what's it going to do to me? It's going to pull me right off the beam. I'm strong, but I'm not that strong. So how are you going to secure it? Am I tying it to myself? Am I tying it to the structure, to the floor, to whatever I'm working on with it? Oh, here we go. Here's my video. I think. Nope, no signal. That's not a better sign.
Wait for it.
So I've got to decide where I'm going to secure that object, right? So tool tethering isn't as simple as just put a piece of string around something and tie it to your hips. If I'm using a drill that weighs 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 pounds, I'm not tying it to my hips. So we have lots of different options out there on the market. It just depends on what you need and what brand you go with, but there's tons of brands out there. They also make things like this. This is a specific tape designed that if you're going to secure something that doesn't have an auto-locking carabiner, you can secure it with this tape. This is Paull created tape by 3M to secure that object to what you're tying it to. Things like this, adapters that instead of a carabiner, this can hook to the webbing of my harness, and then I can clip right to it so that it's adjustable and removable from my harness in the event I need it. See, she's driving now. She's got it. She's all over it. That was the slide. We almost had it.
Did you see the video, everybody?
Did you guys like that video? It was great,
It was
right?
really good, right?
So, one of the things to keep in mind is if your tool weighs more than 5 pounds, it should not be tied to your body, because that can cause damage or injury to you. It needs to be tied to the structure. If it weighs more than 5 pounds, we're always tying it to the structure. But every one of these tool lanyards is going to have a weight rating on it, right? Whether it's 5 pounds, it's 25 pounds, it's 15 pounds, it's 60 pounds, whatever it may be.
Can I tie that to the belt loop on my pants?
That will break the belt loop on your pants. That's what those positioning D-rings could be utilized for, or like using this, you could hook it to the webbing of your shoulder, right? If I'm using an impact, it's up here most of the time. I want to hook it somewhere that it is ergonomically convenient for me to utilize that without this tool lanyard stretching me out all the time, right? And now I'm fighting resistance of the elastic. I want it close and convenient enough that it's useful for me to utilize that tool.
How many of those lanyards could I have on me without causing me to get all tangled up?
I mean, it's going to depend on your ability to keep them out of your way so you're not twisting it up on your wrist, right? I mean, most of us aren't using 15 or 30 tools in a day. You may only be using a couple. You might. You're not using them all at the same time, hopefully, though. You're going to need a couple, 3 more arms there. So, yeah. But when it comes to tool tethering, one of the other important things to keep in mind, right, is I'm tethering my tools, but if I'm an iron worker and I'm using bolts and nuts and I'm bolting up beams up there, I'm not going to tether every bolt because that makes it impossible for me to actually do my job. So some tool tethering has limitations, right? I could do an impact, but I'm not going to do a bolt that I'm using to bolt together the steel beam of the building.
What if you're not wearing fall protection? What other items could you attach to?
So in the event you're not wearing fall protection, if you had tool bags on, you could attach it to the belt of your tool bag. You could attach it to the ladder you're working off of, maybe if you're inside the building, right? And I'm working off of a ladder 14 feet up in the ground. I may not need fall protection for this application, but I could tie it to the ladder so that if I dropped it, it's still at the top of the ladder. I could attach it to, if I'm working in the ceiling, maybe to a joist or a rafter or something that's up above my head. That would be another option of somewhere to tie it to if you're not wearing fall protection for what you're doing.
But depending on how heavy that tool is, tip over your ladder.
It could. So that's another limitation. Just like 5 pounds to your person, I don't want to tie 40 pounds to the top of my ladder. Are we skipping the video? Did she get it to work?
Get it tied off using a lanyard, then you'd use the barricade.
Right, you could use a barricade, right?
But it might bounce.
It could. So this is an investigation, right, from OSHA? This one's you.
All right, so this one is dated October 20th, 2018. An employee was performing demolition activities and was struck by a 16-foot scaffold plank when it fell approximately 90 feet. The employee was killed. So this is another example like what we were just talking about, a ladder and stuff of that nature. It's material securement. So just because we're further back or we think it's safe and secure, that's obviously not the case here.
So I'm not going to tie a scaffold plank to myself, but I'm going to use barricading down below, right? Everybody's seen red danger tape across the bottom of the job. You put your sign on it, people's phone numbers so they can contact you, keeps it safe. I'm going to use maybe a guardrail system I could use opening protection, overhead protection, covered walkways outside of your job site, inside of your job site to access the building, covered walkways downtown for the sidewalk to protect pedestrians. That's a common practice among all of our companies. Fencing, we've got a 6-foot fence running all the way across the edge of the job site that helps keep objects and material inside of our project. We can also use barricading, that red danger tape. Debris netting is a very effective one, especially on taller buildings. As we move the progression of construction up, you move the progression of the debris netting up. And then spotters, right? When I'm moving things into the building with a forklift, I can utilize a spotter down below, help keep people out of that area, keep people out of the danger zone.
All right. Before we get into the next one, the video is going to start here in
Oh, perfect.
right now.
Good, I'm glad, because this is a good video. We worked really hard on it. No, she'll come back. She's got it. She's all over it.
It's all good.
How confident you may be every day when you step foot onto a construction site, one dropped tool or a falling object could turn your day from awesome to absolute abysmal in no time. Many of us define tools as our annoying and harmless coworker, but we're talking about the real tools, the one we use every day, and they can be dangerous if we don't stop the drop. Many workers overlook the danger of something as simple as a drop tool or a falling object. You may think it's no big deal. Well, think again. Welcome to Stop the Drop and the Tool Drop Zone, where we'll show you how falling objects from an elevation of 32 feet can leave your head feeling flatter than your morning pancakes. Here are our heroes, the leaders, the men and women who do the hard work. And here are the tools that could cause extreme harm or injury with just one little slip. Due to lack of human volunteers, we decided watermelons would take one for the team today. Sorry, melons, we know it ain't easy being green. First up, the Klein lineman's tool. Watch as 2,598 pounds of force rains down on this unsuspecting chunk of fruit. Well, that was messy. Next, the nut. Harmless, right? Wrong. That little sucker lands with 2,800 pounds of force. That's enough to turn your brain into mush, literally. This flathead is not screwing around. With 576 pounds of force, it's got a sharp point to make directly through your thick head. You thought a tape measure was your buddy? Think again. That thing hits with 2,976 pounds of force. It's not just measuring, it's destroying. Of course, we have the sledgehammer. Weighing in at over 5 pounds, this thing hits with a striking force. With 17,376 pounds of force, let's let Peter Gabriel be your sledgehammer, as opposed to the real thing. Next up, the all-thread. That's 2,800 pounds of force that could penetrate right through your head. Now, meet the rubber mallet. Don't let the name fool you. 4,125 pounds of force had this watermelon cracking up. Literally. A 3-foot chunk of 2x4 lumber has a splintering effect of 14,000 pounds of force. This little piece of falling lumber will put you in an early slumber. That's a bummer. Just in case we haven't been clear, we're going to continue to hammer home the point with 4,598 pounds of this deadly tool drop. With 6,176 pounds of force, there will be no rebounding from this rebar. Finally, the bullpen, small but oh so deadly, a whopping 8,000 pounds of force. Who knew something so tiny could pack such a punch? You mess with the bull, you get the horns. This is becoming a little redundant, so we'll throw a wrench into things of the 8,598 pounds force variety. Here's some concrete evidence of what it will look like if you don't think about falling tools or dropped objects. So you're thinking, I'll just wear a hard hat or helmet and I'll be fine, right? Wrong. Your head protection may help, but when you've got 8,000 pounds of force coming down, you're gonna need more than PPE. You're gonna need a miracle. So, remember folks, gravity wins. Falling tools and objects are no joke. Implement engineering controls to stop the drop and use administrative controls to protect employees from falling objects. These, along with PPE, will help to protect your noggin and avoid turning your head into melon salad. Stop the drop and be safe out there.
So, simple wearing a hard hat obviously is not effective, right? Based on the testing we did out there to make that video, continue to damage even when wearing your hard hats, your new Type 2 helmets. All of those things still led to damage and injury potential for employees on the job site.
Is this video available on your website? Or?
It's on YouTube, actually.
And that actually is on part of that AGC website.
Yeah, it's on the website.
They
it's
host
on
it.
YouTube.
You go over, remember when we showed at the very top in the ribbon AGC, you go over on the far right, they'll go to safety, and you'll get all these toolbox talks, you'll get everything, including the video.
So, material securement, right? Obviously, we're always trying to comply with OSHA standards. Avoid storing by floor and wall openings, right? On the building, we run out of space quickly, but when you're stacking material or storing material next to a duct shaft or next to the perimeter of the building, you have higher potential for that to come off the edge of the building or come down that duct shaft. Stable and secured, right? Every stack of material on your job site should be stable and secured, especially when we're working on either the top floor or the roof of your building or outside on the perimeter, maybe on swing stages or scaffolding. Secure everything from that wind uplift. Like we saw earlier, from 200 feet off the ground, I can go 400 feet out. That's a lot farther if we've got a nice breeze and that piece of plywood or that piece of Den's glass gets uplift from that breeze. It has a lot more potential.
So here's another one. This one is dated September 22nd, 2023. At 2:40, an employee was working as a fire watch for site preparation contractor. A crew member was cutting angle iron from the structure frame on a 2-story commercial building being demolished. A piece of angle iron steel tube fell from the 2nd story while being cut and struck the employee, killing them. So what this is somebody doing fire watch, or maybe like, I think it was a security guard. So they're down below, they're watching this, and they're right in the line of fire. So basically the minute they cut that piece of tube steel, material securement, boom, changed somebody's total life right there.
Yeah, gravity works 100% of the time, all the time.
Well said.
Oop.
Oh God, that's another video.
Here's another video. We may
So-
have another problem here with the other video.
What that video, well, I think we should just skip it for right
We'll just
now.
skip it for now. Yeah,
Please, thank you.
thank you.
So with that one, actually this one's you.
Okay, so safe cargo, right? Anytime you're moving material on the job site, you're picking things up, lifting it overhead with a crane, for instance, always using qualified riggers for hoisting with cranes, right? If someone has not been trained and taught how to do that application properly, they're not qualified to do that, that is not the guy you need rigging up the material that flies over the entire rest of the job site's heads. Equipment lifted per manufacturer, always using proper lifting eyes, proper attachments to those lifting eyes, protecting your rigging from sharp edges, using softeners, changing the type of material you're rigging with, whether it's cable or chain or synthetic, and then controlling the backside of a trailer when it's being offloaded, right? As we load and unload trucks on the job site, we always want to make sure we've got good perimeter control around those trailers and protect that backside of what's being offloaded from a truck.
When we talk about rigging as well, for all of us, just remember, if that rigging hook says China on it, do not use that piece of member. What that is that's pot metal. It really doesn't have the testing levels. So don't just think that, oh, I went to Home Depot and I got it. Don't do that. Don't put somebody in a predicament when you might be utilizing something which should be certified rigging equipment. Okay.
Cheaper's not always better. That's why Starbucks is in business and gas stations don't sell a lot of coffee.
So check this one out. Here we are, safe cargo. Notice how the rigging is on this. So out of this group, one of our members shared this with us. So here you see, this is actually, it looks like it's a Connex, but it's actually an air handler. And pay attention to where the rigging is. It's towards the center. Next slide. That's what's left of it. So when we talk about how serious rigging is, what I would tell you right now to share, when we had this come up, nobody was hurt, nobody was killed.
It starts before just doing that, right? Because we need to have a proper pick plan. No overlooking.
Good point. So what the question here is, actually the comment is, it starts even before we rig it, is that we start with a pick plan. So we know what we're lifting. Keep in mind, when you're lifting an air handler, they have the rigging points. They're gonna tell you where you're supposed to be picking. Should that have been on a spreader bar to help dissipate and transfer that load? So that is correct. When this thing came down, this is what's left. And obviously, good news is nobody got hurt, nobody got killed, but at the same time, how easy is it to go get an air handler for your job? This ain't, oh, let's put in another order, let's get this. So just think about what you just did to your overall project as well.
The side forces of the air handler, it wasn't picked from the proper picking locations, and it wasn't designed to support those side forces, and the entire air handler kind of imploded on itself and came out through the bottom.
Go back to the slide.
Yeah.
See how it kind of crimped, looks like a pop can, kind of folded on itself. All right, next slide.
This thing doesn't like it when I jump back and forth too fast. So when we talk about safe cargo, right, this is the average semi-trailer on your job site. I brought in my little forklift here to load and unload it. I got 4 zones on this semi-trailer. I got the green zone. That is where your observers, project managers interested in it, people reading lift tickets, signing delivery slips, your truck driver, that's where they can live. It's from the green zone forward, from the back of the cab forward. The safest place for them is actually way over there in the corner, 100 or 50 feet away, out of the way of the operation that I'm trying to create right now. Then I've got my amber zones, my yellow zones. Those are my cautionary zones. Only people involved in this activity should be anywhere near those yellow zones, because those are people directly in the line of getting hit by material or hit by the forklift coming on and off of this truck. Then on the back side, I've got my red no-go zone, also called the hospital side of the load. Because when I'm unloading something, whether it's with the crane or the forklift or whatever it may be, if you're standing on the back side of that trailer and this load shifts towards you, the only place you have left to go is the hospital. That's your best case scenario when you're standing on the hospital side of the load, is you get to go to the hospital today. The other case scenario is not good for any of us, right? Yes, sir.
This is our loading and unloading checklist, and why do we have this? Well, we had a significant event. We had a truck driver that was in a hurry. He was on the back side of that truck, putting his straps away in the box next to his trailer. We were unloading our parcel from the trailer. Our spotter didn't see him get behind there, and when we picked up our load, another load was attached to it. We came down on him, compound fractured legs. So if you don't have this checklist, please, I will send this to you, because we hear from the OSHA directors every year that they're having fatalities here in Colorado because of this same thing. We're still having challenges with truck drivers and everyone else getting on backside loads, so please put something in place. If you need that checklist, I'll send it to you.
No secrets in safety.
Alex have a strange propensity to want to interlock.
Yeah, like a Jenga block.
Move each other when you're moving one of them, they both move, or 3 of them move.
Here's our other video, I think. It's playing, but it's not showing.
Something needs to change
Yeah.
before anyone else gets hurt.
All right, well,
Note to self, don't put a lot of videos in your presentations. It makes it really tough for your IT folks. But yeah, J.E. Dunn did a great job with their loading and unloading checklist to help prevent those scenarios where people are in the wrong place at the wrong time.
and keep in mind, that is a delivery truck, but just think in general, if you're using a pallet jack, how does that apply? Is it meaning like just our tools, whether it's a forklift, where are we standing? Where do we know where these loads are gonna go? You don't wanna be in front of these. How about those Broncos?
We'll keep moving.
Yeah. Next slide.
Oop. There you go.
All right. Here's another one. So this one's actually, this is in our backyard. This one's in Inglewood. On August 17, 2021, at 9 a.m., an employee assisting on unloading electric switchgear weighing roughly 1,500 pounds from a delivery truck. During the process, the switchgear fell onto the employee, who was killed due to crushing injuries. So Zane made the comment that that's a hospital zone. It's not always that easy. We're fortunate if it could be a hospital zone. This one, obviously with that, somebody had died from this. And so it's unfortunate. Age 64. And just pay attention, not even in this, just this delivery today about Stop the Drop. If you look at the fatalities that we have seen in industry, it doesn't discriminate on any kind of age group, age, race, gender. Literally, it's anywhere from somebody at the age of 18 all the way to 65, if not older. So somebody coming on at the end of their career, probably like, hey, I'm just about ready to finish my job, and this happens. Go ahead.
So this is some information that we were conveniently given by some of the insurance carriers. This is a list of injuries, and you're not going to be able to read it from the back of the room. I can't hardly read it from the front of the room. But this is a list of injuries, and on this far right-hand side, we have a total dollar value of some of those claims. So we pulled out a couple that we want to talk about real quick. So in 2016, after being told not to remove the final strap from a panel, an employee had a lapse in memory and removed the final strap, causing a panel to fall on them. That injury resulted in $716,547 of injury costs. That is just injury costs. That is the cost of making that person as close to normal again as you can through medical visits, PT, doctors, x-rays, surgeries, whatever it may entail. That's just the cost of making them as close to whole as we can make them. 2019, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, an employee was walking carrying a ladder. An AC unit fell from a hand truck at the top of the hill and landed on their back right shoulder and wrist. So they had a shoulder injury and a wrist injury because an AC unit fell off and landed on their back. That resulted in a $511,000 claim and change just to make that person as close to whole as we can. That's always the goal with a medical insurance claim, right? When you send someone to the hospital or the doctor for an injury, it's to make them as close to better as you can. Some injuries are always going to be life-altering. Yes, ma'am?
As close to whole may not be very close.
It may not be anything like their normal was before. That could be a life-altering injury. A $700,000 doctor bill is probably a life-altering injury. It costs about $3,000 to go to the ER and get a couple of stitches a day. Yes, sir.
Are you including like direct costs?
This is just direct cost. This is just strictly medical cost through an insurance company. That's what it costs for an AC unit or panels falling over. This last one, struck by falling equipment causing a broken leg, that broken leg costs $266,000 to put back as close to normal as we can. That's surgeries, PT, doctor visits. That's just for the medical costs of this injury that altered these people's lives from falling objects and getting caught in between or struck by an object. So, this is another group of information from an insurance carrier over the last 10 years from that member group. Struck by objects, struck with a falling object, 11 claims. The average claim cost was just about $12,000. The total sum of occurrences was $135,000 for those 11 claims. Struck by a flying object, they had 2 claims in that category. Average cost $400, total cost $800. Struck by a moving object, 3 claims in that. Average cost was just about $900. Struck or injured by a falling or flying object. They had 61 claims in that category. The average claim cost was $16,000. Could you imagine if in the last 10 years you had 16 times that you had to pay 61 times you had to pay $16,000 to make one of your employees whole so they could go home at the end of the day? That's astronomical. That resulted in $983,000 across 61 claims. And then struck/injured by a falling or flying object, there was 8 claims in that category. The average cost was $97,000. Total cost $777,000 for those 8 claims. Grand total between this insurance carrier's members in 85 claims for falling or flying objects, the average cost was $22,000. And that total cost was just under $2 million, $1.9 million in 10 years for 85 injuries just from falling and flying objects. Struck by incidents cost this insurance group as a whole almost $2 million in just medical visits. That's not your indirect costs. That's not the problems that it created on site for the rest of the crew that witnessed the injury or the delays or the training that you had to do or new programs or new things that you implemented, new technology you bought to try to avoid that in the future. It doesn't account for any of that. This is just to make your people healthy again.
Would my premiums have gone up?
I bet your premiums would have gone up. Probably a whole heck of a lot.
This doesn't factor in fatalities.
No, this is just injuries that were survived that they went to medical visits to get whole and healthy again.
That does not include the impact of the mental or physical well-being of that person.
Right, there's a lot of mental health issues around watching a catastrophic injury or incident on a job site. If you've never seen one, I hope you never do, but that leaves a lasting effect on a lot of people. So, this is a fancy little tool that's on the OSHA website. This is OSHA's injury calculator, right? So, you can go onto the OSHA website if you're curious or you need something to help support an argument for a new technology or a new PPE or whatever it may be. This can be a tool you can utilize. You can select your injury type, put in, or you can put in the information on what your compensation costs were, profit margin, number of injuries, things like that. We did a couple just as examples, threw together some basic information in there, right? Multiple physical injuries. We had one instance of that. The direct cost, let's say it was $78,000. That means my indirect cost was about $85,000, which means my total cost was $164,000. So if you can imagine that $700,000 claim, if at $78,000 I've got $85,000, that means my $700,000 claim probably cost me $850,000 in indirect costs.
For those of you in the room that don't understand indirect costs, what this means is not related specifically to the injury. This now means, hey, I got to go find somebody else to do that person's job, or now I have to pay overtime to be able to meet the schedule, or now I need to have somebody go drive that employee, or how do you get that person whole? There's all these indirect costs, the additional training. That was our operator. Now we got to go get a new operator.
Yeah, a concussion, right? Simple injury, concussion. Costs $54,000 in medical bills potentially. Indirect cost, $60,000. If I can't come to work because the doctor says I have to stay home because I hurt my brain really bad with my concussion, you're going to have to pay somebody to do what I've been doing. That's going to cost you $60,000. If I've got a contusion, right? Anybody know what a contusion is? That is a simple word for bruise in the medical world. A contusion, I got a really bad bruise. It costs $27,000 to my company, which means my total bill to my company for that really bad bruise is now almost $60,000 when I include my indirect costs. So this OSHA calculator, as you put in information, it creates these direct or indirect costs for you and helps you see this. Now these last two columns here are really important because if I've got a total cost for my multiple physical injuries of $164,000, based on what I said in my OSHA calculator, my percentages of work that I get to take into my company, my dollar value that I get to keep as a company, I would have to do an additional sale of $2,865,000 just to cover their medical bills based on my percentage that I get to keep as my cost for doing that work. If I did the entire total cost with the indirect costs, I would have to do $5.4 million worth of work based on a simple fee of, call it 3% or 2% or 5%, whatever your percentage is, you can put that into the calculator to tell you how much work you got to put in place to cover that injury.
We're going to have to go into lightning round. All right, we're in lightning round.
We're all over it.
So here we go. Stop the drop best practices. Next slide.
And these are simple things like housekeeping, things like that you want to do to help prevent objects from coming off the edge of your building or to a lower level.
Here we are with the different posters from our manufacturers to consider. So stop by our booth. We have examples of all these different types of tool tethering, as well as the application and the catalogs.
Yeah, 3M's got an app that you can go to their tool room, put in a tool, and they tell you what type of tool lanyard you're going to need for that tool based on the manufacturer's weight, things like that. They'll do the brain power for you.
Keep going.
This is an example of that tool room.
And you can see the weight rating.
So, the ask. This is what we're asking for Stop the Drop Task Force. The goal is for you guys to all join Stop the Drop as part of your company, right? In October of 2026, utilize the information off of the website, join the program, participate in Stop the Drop Week, have your stand downs with the toolbox talks. They're all in there. You don't have to use any brain power to create them. Recognize the good things that happen, the good applications of tool tethering or barricading on your job site. Don't forget to reward people for doing the right thing. Safety moments about dropped objects. Increase the conversations around preventing dropped objects. Increase the observations and audits focused on those dropped objects. And then sharing stories of dropped objects. The smashing pumpkins, this is from a job site similar to the watermelons that we did in the video. They did a demonstration on the project to get people interested and invested in the process of protecting themselves.
What is the policy on tool lanyards for OSHA? What does OSHA say about tool lanyards?
If you're aware, there's not an actual...
There's not a policy from OSHA because they won't tell you what you have to do. They'll say you can't drop objects. How you get there,
How do you protect
tool
your
lanyards,
employees?
barricades, whatever it may be, that's up to you to decide.
And if you're aware of the hazard, you have to protect.
Yeah. So, through the alliance between OSHA's Inglewood and Denver offices and the Stop the Drop Task Force, this presentation was developed for informational purposes only. It does not necessarily reflect the official views of the OSHA U.S. Department of Labor. That is the standard quote that we have to give. So based on your question, that's my answer.
No. And then the next slide is just your QR codes. Come over to the booth. We can give you these QR codes as well.
Yeah.
So biggest thing, stop the drop. Go there to get to all this information. Thank you so much.
All right, we about ready to get started? We good? Okay. You hearing me okay in the back? Hi. We were trying the mic here to see if it was working. It was really loud in the other room, so we should have made our room really loud. So one thing we've learned for next year, longer breaks, right? We only built 10-minute breaks in between sessions, so next year 15 minutes, right? A little bit longer breaks. So thanks everyone for coming. My name's Kristin White. I'm a workplace safety partner with Fisher Phillips. Fisher Phillips is a national labor and employment law firm, so we work across the country. Basically anything that kind of runs that gamut of employer-employee relationship. So I specialize on the workplace safety side, so that typically means that I was thinking about Matt's with Stop the Drop. When things get dropped, we get called many times. So we do a lot of crisis management and crisis response. So today what we're going to talk about is two things. Kind of where is OSHA at, which they're back to work, so that's a good thing, right? Exactly. And where NIOSH is. And what we've got here today is I put OSHA first. Are we getting a little feedback? Okay, let me move it down a little bit. Is that better? Okay, we put OSHA first and then I put NIOSH second. And I should have flipped it because my NIOSH news is kind of a bummer, so I'll just warn you. We don't have great news. And now you can't hear it at all. Okay, we're trying here. How's that in the back? Tammy, are you hearing me okay? A little louder? I'll just talk a little louder. How's that sound? Okay. Let's talk first about where we are with OSHA. So where are we at now? Well, we just came out of the shutdown, right, that we were all aware of. So at this time, most of OSHA staff has been furloughed for 44 days. What we saw was we were dealing with imminent danger, fatality inspections, but other than that, OSHA was not on job sites. Talking to Todd Flick last week, the assistant area director in Denver, he said the most frustrating part is he still gets phone calls, he still gets the complaints, and then he says, great, appreciate your information, I can't help you right now. So very frustrating from the agency standpoint. From the employer standpoint, your obligations continued, right? So we're still having to comply. We were advising people if you've got citations, you still want to comply, still send in notices of contest. But now the government is back open. So let's talk about, level set kind of based on experience, OSHA basics, and then we'll talk about what is on OSHA's agenda as we go into the next year, because we do have an assistant secretary now. So as most people in this room as safety professionals know, unless you're very new, and I know we have some students, so equating you with OSHA, OSHA regulates all workplace conditions except for MSHA, which does mining. So unless you're on a mine site, you're going to be covered by OSHA. Within the OSHA framework, you have federal OSHA, and then you have 27 state plans. So your state plans operate throughout a furlough. So even though we're a shutdown, right? So they were not impacted by that shutdown. So OSHA's looking at, they regulate about 100 million workers, 30 to 40% of the population. So it's a big footprint for them and what gets regulated. There we go. So OSHA deregulation. This is something that, if we had a different president in the White House, we would not be talking about deregulation, we'd be talking about regulation. But with the new administration, and we have a new assistant secretary we'll talk about in a moment, OSHA has put deregulation at the top of their agenda. And they're looking at maybe 20 or so new OSHA initiatives. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it's not as easy as, when DOJ was out in the media and it was like, okay, we're just going to take out regulations. It's not quite that easy. You can't just erase them and pull them out of the book. So if anyone's ever been involved in notice and comment rulemaking to get a new rule, like does anyone remember silica in construction? Okay, what about confined space in construction? How long did that rule take? 10 years? Yeah, okay. So when you want to get rid of a regulation, you go through the same notice and comment rulemaking. So not saying it's going to take them 10 years. Obviously, it's easier to pull back than put one in. But you still have to go through the process. So just understand there is a notice and comment rulemaking process for them to go through to roll back. But let's look at kind of what's been on the agenda that they're looking at from a deregulation. So first, the general duty clause. Does anyone not know what I mean when I say general duty clause? And that's okay if you don't. Couple people, okay, great, I appreciate it. So general duty clause is just simply a clause that means all employers have to provide a safe workplace. So it's gotten used in past administrations, Republican and Democrat, basically as kind of the gap filler. So if I don't have a regulation right on point, I can cite you under the general duty clause saying, well, this accident happened, you must have failed to have a safe workplace for your employees. So one of the changes is the new administration's proposing they want to put some limits around it. And to be honest, it likely does get abused. It gets a little bit overused, right, if we don't have a regulation. So one of the proposals has been that they would limit OSHA's ability to cite employers for hazards that are inherent in that profession. So I'll give you a couple examples. Does anyone remember the SeaWorld case from years ago? Trish is nodding yes. So the SeaWorld case was where an employee was killed by a killer whale. Name implies the animal that the worker was dealing with. And OSHA cited them under the general duty clause that they should have taken more precautions for that employee. So one of the things they've looked at is, was that an inherent danger of that profession when you're working with a killer whale in the water, that you may have an incident that could lead to death? That's one example. The other is sports. So they're looking at in sports, is there an inherent risk that you take when you engage in professional sports? So we'll see kind of where this develops, but that's been what they've talked about, of trying to maybe put some parameters around inherently dangerous, high-risk jobs. Could it make its way to construction, which is considered at certain times to be high risk? Probably a lot more controversial to bring it there, but we'll see where it goes. The second one is an interesting one to me, and I'd love to hear comments from safety professionals. But one of the rules that's been proposed would be to remove the medical evaluation requirements for filtering face piece respirators and for your PAPRs. Yeah, you're shaking your head no. Like, are you thinking like, why are they doing this? What's the point? I mean, I honestly, I think I've had the same thought even as a workplace safety attorney. I understand, when we went through COVID and we were dealing with fit tests for N95s and those were relaxed, okay, that makes sense. I can understand that. But this is what the proposal's been. So one thing to keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier about with deregulation, is there will be notice and comment rulemaking. So, if what gets proposed does not make sense, we believe it's not going to lead to a safer workplace. It's not, just getting rid of regulatory hurdles. It may hurt workers. This is something that you can make comments on when these rules are put out there. And if you don't want to do that as a company, you can always do that through an organization. All the partners here with ASAC and AGC, you can comment as an industry group, so that way your name is not out there if you want to make comments. So something to keep in mind. And again, these are just proposals. They're not, nothing's been passed, but just understand kind of what's on the agenda. The last one, directly relevant for this audience, is a rule regarding construction's illumination requirements that would rescind that you've got to have illumination requirements on your job sites, either natural or artificial methods. Dave, what do you think about that? Yeah, more light, right? I know it's interesting. We'll have to see a little bit of what the I guess I would say, the proposal when they put it out, of what the basis of where this is coming from. Is it a cost issue? Is it the point that they think it's construction, so they have natural light? Yeah, I'm not sure where it's coming. Right. The comment was headlamp. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, these are just some proposals. In talking to a group of safety professionals, we probably all kind of scratch our heads on some of these. So we'll see where they go, but these are the ones that are out there. So I want you to be aware of, to watch them. A couple other things that have already been withdrawn. We'll talk about the heat rule. So the revocation of rulemaking procedures. So in July, OSHA revoked a final regulation that had required the Assistant Secretary to consult with the Advisory Committee on Construction Safety in promulgating and modifying rules. My speculation is this was seen as maybe a red tape step, although it was probably leading to some better education. But again, that was revoked in the summertime. OSHA withdrew the proposal that would have amended your OSHA 300 logs to add the column for MSDs. I mean, my goodness, we've talked about the musculoskeletal disorders, and is it going on the log? Is it not going on the log? I mean, we've been talking about that since the Bush administration, but this proposal was withdrawn that would have required you to put that on your log. The last one I want to talk about here is the heat standard. So the heat standard has not gone away, but the comments were due October 30th, so they kept kind of extending the period to take comments on. And that obviously closed at the end of October. It appears to be on the back burner, but what we understand is it's not completely off the table. So, what I understand from we have a government affairs group that works in DC, and what we understand is that there's a big push to say, look, we should push out a heat rule now if we can make it a little more employer friendly. The heat rule that we were all looking at last year, and we talked a lot about at conferences, had a pretty onerous requirements. It wasn't just shade and water like we're used to in California, but you had requirements to provide paid breaks and certain breaks at certain times and certain temperatures. So what's being looked at right now is there a way to push out a heat rule that appears a little more industry friendly? And instead of just scrapping it all together. Because, as we know in this country, we tend to go back and forth from administrations. And so with the idea being that, if we don't have a heat rule now, we're just going to see a heat rule in a few years. So is there a way to be more, be part of that conversation? So just be aware that, to me, the heat rule is likely going to come out, or something will come out at some point. At least that's what we're predicting. We may say in a year, okay, the heat rule's done, but we think something may be coming that direction. We've seen a lot of the states get involved on the heat side. I mean, any of you who practice or work in California or Washington or Oregon, you're already aware of complying with the heat rule. Last year, the legislature here in Colorado actually tried to pass a heat rule. Was anyone aware of that? Yeah, a few heads shaking. So they put together a heat rule. It was very close to tracking what OSHA had. I'm not sure who was going to enforce that. That was going to be interesting because we're not a state plan state. So that was interesting of who was going to enforce that. It did not pass. But we'll see. I would expect it to come back again, especially if federal OSHA does not keep pushing a heat rule. So potentially we could have something here in Colorado even without being a state plan, which could be very interesting from a regulation side. So more to come on that. So Dave Keeling has been confirmed as the Assistant Secretary for OSHA. So OSHA operated most all of this year without a Senate confirmed leader. So it really was just kind of business as usual. We saw some, like we looked at the deregulation efforts, so we had some efforts that were being put out that they wanted to focus on, but we really didn't have much of a leader. But he has now been confirmed. That happened, I think, right about the time of the shutdown. We had leaders get confirmed. One of the things I think that's going to be interesting and I think is important for you all in industry is that, Dave Keeling comes from a safety background. So we've always had, at least since I've been practicing, we've always had a head of OSHA that didn't have that practical experience. So they came out of academia or they came out of the political segment. One of my partners, who came from the legal side was the head. I mean, it's just, we've never had someone who, deals with the day-to-day like you all do. So this could be really, I think, could be really good for OSHA and really interesting for us. He was a UPS package handler and he rose up through, where he became a top safety role at Amazon before he was appointed. He's really looking at, can we make VPP actually work for employers? Can we make that mean something? Are there regulations that make sense, some that don't? But the good news is he's been where you all are. So I think that's could be a really good thing for us when we're trying to get practical with some of our regulations and what it looks like. We are seeing this one I want to put out there from the states. We are seeing the state plans be very aggressive right now. So just keep that in mind if you operate in state plan states, that they feel like if the federal government's pulling back, whether they have or not, that they're going to fill the gap. So we're seeing very aggressive enforcement on the state side right now. So the reason I called this kind of slowed enforcement with a question mark is we haven't seen it yet. We anticipate that, and potentially when Dave Keeling gets gets fully, he's in the position now, but kind of gets his staff going, will we see it? We still see very high penalties. It used to be that if you had like an other than serious or a serious, you might hit 4,000 or 5,000. Most of those are now above 15,000. Even for smaller companies, maybe you're 8,000 or 9,000 if you're a small company. If you're a large company, it's going to be the max almost every time. The willful and repeat up around the 161,000, and we're seeing penalties in that range. So very high penalties that have been issued this year. Severe violator, I will not ask you to raise your hand if you have been in that program. No, but the severe violator program is still alive and well, which essentially if you have had an inspection with multiple repeats or willfuls, you can be put in the severe violator program and then you have to go through a process to get out of that program. Again, we mentioned the state plans. The last one I want to mention here is the rapid response investigation. Has anyone responded to one of the RRI letters, rapid response? It used to be called phone and fax. Anyone done that themselves? A couple hands. So we're seeing a lot of rapid response. So I just want to talk for a moment about kind of best practices when you're responding to those. Oh, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I want to throw these in with your most common OSHA construction citations. Probably not a surprise for all of you. These simply do not change year to year. I mean, it's, sometimes your ladders may move up, but fall protection is typically the number one and has been, goodness, forever. Trish said, for a long time. But these generally do not change. So I was thinking about from the last presentation when they're talking about go in and with what can you do from a housekeeping standpoint and trying to reduce your drops and your cost on your jobs. These are the easy ones. When you're thinking about a hazard analysis, where do I start? Start with this list, right? It's always the same list. It's easy place to start. Okay, let's go back to the rapid response here. So we're seeing, what we know from the Denver office right now, and talking to Todd Flick a week or so ago, he's down to about 6 inspectors, which is an incredible drop from where they normally operate. So much lower staff. So, which means that, if you have a fatality, they have to respond. Certain complaints, like a lockout, tagout, or a guarding, they're probably going to respond. But a lot of reports right now, hospitalizations, even amputations, we're seeing the use of the RRI letter. So, but it's always that area director's discretion, right? They get to decide when the report comes in if they want to send you a letter to respond or if they're going to respond themselves. So let's talk about what it looks like. So typically what happens is OSHA gets a report from you or they get a complaint. And they're going to call you and say, hey, we got this complaint. Here's what they reported. We're going to send you a letter. You're going to need to report back to us and tell us what happened. The letter's going to say you need to respond in 5 days. You need to respond in 5 days or get an extension. You can get an extension, but get that ahead of time. Don't just ignore it. Don't blow that deadline, because then you're just buying yourself an on-site inspection. Typically, if your response is adequate, OSHA's not going to come out. But they will open an on-site if you fail to respond. And sometimes when you respond, we've had it happen with heat inspections, that they may call and say, hey, I need a little more information. So you may get that follow-up from them. The Inglewood office is a little bit, we'll give Chad a little shout out. He's a little better at telling you they're closing it out than the Denver office. So the Denver office may not tell you they're closing it out. You just may not hear from them again. But as I tell people, no news is always good news from the government, right? So if you haven't heard from them, they're likely closing it out. Let's talk about when you're responding to your to that letter. Do your own investigation. Make that a thorough investigation. Be strategic about what you put in the letter. OSHA's got that non-mandatory investigation form that they will attach. You can use that as a guide, or you can draft your own letter. Don't list employee misconduct as the first or sole cause. So it may be, when Trish was talking this morning about, what caused the incident, an employee mistake, that exactly may be what happened. And legally, if you end up with citations and we have to challenge citations, we may raise that as a defense. But when you put that in your rapid response letter, it turns OSHA off. They hate those words, employee misconduct, employee mistake. Now, how do we say that without saying employee misconduct? Exactly. We had a policy. We trained the employee on the policy, and they didn't follow our policy. We've done a stand down, and we've reiterated our policy. I just said employee misconduct without saying employee misconduct, right? Because those are the factors of it. It makes a big difference to OSHA, because it shows, okay, they do have a policy, they're training on it, they're auditing it, they're enforcing their policy, and you know what, they still took action, even though they thought this employee that day, for whatever reason, chose not to wear their fall protection. They then the next day had a stand down and retrained all the employees to make sure everybody was aware and understood. Or we came in and we checked everybody's equipment. We made sure that everybody had the proper equipment. So there's ways to say it without saying it, if that is what happened. Have a corrective action in your response. Even if you think, as a company, we didn't do anything wrong, everything went well. We sat everybody down, we went back over the policy. We did some retraining. Yeah, go ahead, Trish.
Your corrective action shouldn't be that you fired the employee.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, Trish said the corrective action shouldn't be that you fired the employee. It may be the employee got fired, It may be that you have we have clients that have gone to a 0 tolerance fall protection policy because it's the only way they can keep their roofers, to be clipped in. 0 tolerance. You're caught, you're fired. But yeah, you're not going to put that in there. You're going to put in, we stopped the work. We met with all the employees. We made sure everyone had the right equipment, understood the policy. Right? That's what we're putting in there. But yeah, you may end up with it. But yeah, that way you're, again, not just blaming the employee for what happens. So a couple things I want to make sure everyone's aware with OSHA's new penalty reduction. So this came out this summer, that OSHA started a new penalty reduction. So if you are a small business and you get cited by OSHA, make sure you ask if these reductions have been applied to the penalty, because they're supposed to be applied to any citations being issued now, and it's not always happening, I will tell you. So make sure you ask, did you apply the penalty reduction to us? If not, why not? Because they should be applying it. But if you have 25 or fewer employees, you're eligible for up to a 70% penalty reduction. If you do a quick fix, right? So if you fix the hazard while OSHA was on site, it was something that was easy to take care of, can be up to a 15% reduction. This clean history is a good one because it used to be that from a history standpoint, OSHA would only give you credit if you had had an OSHA inspection and not gotten citations. But a lot of you may have not seen OSHA ever, or you haven't seen them in years, right? But you weren't getting any credit for that. So that's part of this clean history, is that now you're eligible for up to a 20% reduction even if you have never had an OSHA inspection, because they look at that now as a clean history. And these can be combined. So make sure you're asking what penalty, what reductions were added in. When you get, oh yeah, go ahead, Dave.
So the 20% reduction for clean history, is that, how many years do they go back?
Let me see, that's a good question. Let me see if I wrote that down here.
5-year standard thing?
Yeah, like a 5-year look back. Let me see here really quick if I wrote that down. Let's see.
So if you get 70%, then 15%, and then 20, are they going to pay you?
Yeah, I know, right? They should. Does that math? That's government math right there. Let me see. Yes, 5 years, Dave. So if you've never been inspected by OSHA, so never been inspected, like ever, or if you've been inspected in the past 5 years but had no serious, willful, repeat, or failure to abate citations. So you could have an other than serious and still qualify for that penalty reduction. Yeah, it says it can be combined and you can get up to the 70-80%. So they're going to stop you there a little bit. They're not going to pay you, unfortunately. But these, it used to be that the small business cap was 10 employees, and so very few companies were getting that. So now they've at least upped that to 25 employees to get your small business reduction. So yeah, just keep that in mind, that there are those things to talk about and raise. So when you go in for your informal conference, they always tell you, oh, I'll give you 20% off penalty or 30% off penalty. You want to ask first, well, did you already take this into account? Because this should be applied already. Then you might be able to get some more off of that already. So there we go. So I want to mention really quick of not talking too much about retaliation or whistleblower claims, but there has been an enhanced focus on retaliation claims. So there's a difference when, there's two kinds of letters you can get from OSHA, typically. So we talked about the letter you may get with the rapid response, right? So you've had an incident or there's been a complaint, OSHA sends you a letter and says, we've had a report of a hazard, I want you to investigate and respond back. There's a separate letter that comes from, and it looks like it's coming from OSHA and Department of Labor, but it's coming from a whistleblower division. And that letter reads a little bit differently. And make sure you're treating them differently because the processes are very different. The rapid response, quick. You do your investigation, you report back within 5 days. OSHA's typically going to close it out. The whistleblower complaint can last a year, sometimes 2 years. It can take them to investigate. So very different process. OSHA's going to ask for documents. They're going to ask to do interviews. And this is typically where someone has been fired and they've gone and said, I've gotten fired because I made a safety complaint. I was asking for my fall protection equipment and they wouldn't give me any, and that's why they fired me. They might leave out the part about they failed to wear the fall protection equipment and that's why they got fired, but that's what the investigation's for. So when you get those letters, OSHA investigates over like 20 whistleblower statutes. So when you get that letter, it will tell you you know, a complaint has been filed under X law. It may be the Clean Air Act. It may be 11C. Read it, understand that, okay, we're in a different process, and you want to handle that very differently because it lasts a long time. But there's just been an increased focus on this. So OSHA's put out a lot about whistleblower protection on their website. There's a manual to make, you know, try to move these investigations a little faster, although I'll tell you they're still going slow. In March of 2023, OSHA was actually offering visa opportunities for whistleblowers that, you know, in order to encourage employees to come forward with complaints. They were working with the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, to try to make sure they were finding complaints. But there's just been a lot of focus on it. So just want to put that on your radar because, you know, being a safety professional, if an OSHA letter comes in, your boss may say, here, this is from OSHA, figure out what's going on. Just know these different type of letters you may get for your responses. All right, so what are we expecting for next year? It's always like the crystal ball. We would use that this morning. I was thinking about that, a little bit of what we're doing here today. So we still expect robust inspections for fatalities or imminent dangers. You know, if you have, there's a report that someone's working at heights without fall protection, OSHA is likely coming by. If you have someone, either not just your employee, but another contractor who loses their life on the job site, OSHA's coming out. It will be a very robust inspection, and penalties have been high for that. With multi-state employers, make sure that you're tracking your state plan obligations. As I mentioned, the states have been very aggressive. They're putting out new rules. We've just seen very high enforcement there. And then with the RRI, understand that that is something that gets used a lot. Know which kind of response you're making to OSHA. See here. All right. Any questions about OSHA before we watch in the NIOSH? Or any other questions about kind of where we're headed? And maybe we'll have next year we'll have a different conversation of what we've seen happen in the first year of what will really be the first year of OSHA operating under the new administration. Okay, so let's talk about NIOSH for a moment. NIOSH is let's see, here we go. Okay, what are some changes and what do we expect? So as I said, we don't have the best news to report on this. So NIOSH has always been kind of the investigation arm in the in the government. We saw NIOSH a lot during COVID. They were doing a lot of the investigation and the research around respiratory use. And so in March of this year, the Department of Health and Human Services announced that they were going to create the Administration for a Healthy America. So a different agency that was going to combine a lot of these research agencies together. So they were putting NIOSH in there, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, Substance Abuse, Mental Health Service Administration, putting all of these into a new single entity. Now, it's not that they're doing that because they're trying to combine the resources for those entities, unfortunately, but it becomes the cuts that are happening to the different groups. So this transformation was, cutting jobs, major workforce reductions. So the reports indicated that about 2/3 of NIOSH, NIOSH lost about 2/3 of its staff, were either terminated or put on leave. So it really started impacting, the research that they're doing for different programs. So has anyone ever within their company kind of worked with NIOSH on any of their, what kind of programs have you worked with them on?
Back in 2009, 8, 9, 10, we had them come out when we were building roads, and we were cutting all the relief cuts and the joints in the roads. And they came out and put air monitors on everybody with regards to silica dust.
Oh yeah.
Which later moved into the silica standard.
Okay.
So they were doing a lot of research and asked if they could come and monitor our guys.
Yeah, to make. Yeah, did you already heard that? So worked with NIOSH when they came out back in 08 and 09 to kind of do some silica dust monitoring that led to the rule. So it's all that research that can lead into regulation, so we actually have good data.
Is John Howard?
I don't know. I don't know if John Howard is still there or not. I'm not sure if he is one who is still there. He is still there. Okay, there we go. Okay.
That's positive.
Yeah, that is a positive. That is a positive. So budget cuts. So one of the things that came out of this with the proposed budget cuts was zero funding for the Personal Protective Technology Laboratory, which is the group that's doing the research on PPE and different initiatives. So, as Dave mentioned, like when they came out, put the monitors on, study silica, we would see the same with different PPE efforts that they were doing. So some budget cuts there. So, there's a lot of concern that it's going to cause delay or elimination of some of our safety initiatives. I mean, it's one of those that, the heat standard that's been out that we've been talking about was based a lot on NIOSH research and what they were doing with workers and what the exposure was at different levels of heat and high heat. So we'll see if that affects where that rule goes. So the appropriations for NIOSH have not been finalized. So just kind of an update here of where it looks like, but we'll see kind of where this goes. There's different proposals on the table with the continuing resolution that was passed, that just takes us through January 30th. So just make sure everyone's aware even though the government reopened, it's only right now, on the continuing resolution through January 30th. So we potentially could have another shutdown then. So we'll see kind of where the appropriations go for NIOSH. But as you can see, very large cuts that were coming. So an 80% cut to NIOSH and, to what their budget had been. And really significantly impacting their research that they're doing, especially in the area of PPE. It's interesting that the mining research is one of the programs that's still being funded. So this may be an area that, if we think we need more funding, if we need PPE to be focused, construction needs to be a focus to try to, talk to your government affairs people and have them making phone calls. I mean, this is what helps and works. I know talking with Nick, ASAC, and a lot of the industry groups had sent in comments when these cuts were first being proposed. There we go. So here's some research that has been out so everyone understands kind of what they're doing. So one of the things they've put out is the Respiratory Protection Handbook, the revised book that expands the protection list based on their hazard assessments. So NIOSH, can be helpful from a research standpoint when you're trying to do hazard assessments on job sites, and also from firefighter safety. So they do a lot of firefighter prevention work and how to keep firefighters safe when they're, entering buildings. Same thing with wildfire smoke. California has its own rule. It's been looked at, could we have a rule on the federal side dealing with wildfire smoke and prevention? Again, a lot of that research would come from NIOSH. Cannabis worker safety, so that's something else that NIOSH has focused on in the years past, has been the hazards that have grown up as that has become an industry, and then black lung screening, so it's for minors, that they offer the free screenings for minors. So just understanding, just from an educational standpoint of what does NIOSH do, why is it important to fund them, hopefully we can see where the funding goes and where we put our voices on that. So, I had a big summary here with the future is uncertain. It was one of those we were putting this together and I was thinking about, where does this go? We just don't know at this point. We know that NIOSH has done a lot of important research, continues to do so. So the more we can kind of push as an industry to ensure they keep funding, I think will benefit all of us. So, okay, and I'm happy to take questions. I think I got us back on track. So, but happy to take questions about this or anything else from the OSHA regulatory side. So, yes.
Is it possible to get access to some of this information, or if not, do you have recommendations on where we could find some of the information that you added here?
Yeah, so I'm happy to share my slides with you, and then I'd happy to let you know kind of where we pulled the information. Are you thinking from the OSHA side or the NIOSH side, or both?
I was mostly looking at the OSHA updates and context, because I have some nationwide some groups of people that I'd like to be able to share the information.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to share my slides, and then and happy to kind of direct you where we pulled a lot of the information from too. So if you're looking for more of, especially on kind of the deregulation efforts, happy to share that. Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Yep, feel free to email me. This is my email. I'm happy. Yeah, feel free to, or give me your card, and I'm happy to share it either way. You can either email me or give me your card, and I'm happy to share the information.
Your newsletters on your website have a lot of links.
Oh, that's true. Thank you. Yeah, so I appreciate it. So we put out at Fisher Phillips, we have a workplace safety newsletter that we put out. So on our website, you can subscribe to our work. We have newsletters on about anything labor and employment related, but you can subscribe to just workplace safety if that's what you're interested in. And then we send out updates. So we'll send out updates like when Dave Keeling was confirmed. I think we did one when the government reopened and what that means for OSHA. So you can get those kind of from a timely basis, and then we have a newsletter that goes out, I think quarterly, that kind of summarizes and pulls everything together for you. So, you know, we try to push out as much education and information as we can. So, thank you. Yeah, Dave.
I'll just do a shout out, you guys, to Kristin. If you get a hold of her, she is exemplary when it comes to giving you the information you're looking for. I've utilized Kristin for 15 years, whatever. It's been incredible. So.
Oh, thanks, Dave.
Get you what you need.
And I'd even ask him to say that either, so I appreciate that. All right, thanks, everyone.
Good afternoon, guys. My name is Earl Worth. I am with True Safety. From near miss to no miss, how many safety people we have in this room? All right. So I'm speaking to the right crowd, right? It's quite a few years back. Well, first of all, let me just tell you this. It's an honor to have this guy in this room, okay? I started off my safety career with him training me, and he's really nice now. He used to be a little bit more. You should have heard what he called me earlier. Oh, shh. Hey, it wasn't recorded, so it didn't happen, okay? But no, I'm truly honored even to be here, to have Dale in this class. So this is kind of weird, surreal. Near miss to no miss. As I started my safety career, would you guys all agree that most of the time what we're doing is reactionary? And does it drive you nuts as much as it does me? So that was really a pivotal point in my life and my career, is when I was just constantly dealing with just my little minutia stuff, like not wearing safety glasses or little incidents and stuff like that, that ended up being reportables and recordables. And you sit back and you scratch your head and go, what happened here, right? So I really tried to start making sense out of this. And as we go through this, let's see if this is right. I really started trying to figure out with the company I was with is how to build a proactive, safety culture. And like I've heard so many speakers already talk, a culture, right? We might have a culture at our company, but is it positive or negative, right? And really, as you start looking at incidents and stuff like that, and a lot of it, I feel like you've heard throughout the other speakers talk about, is leadership. It's got to start with leadership. And a lot of times we get that disconnect from upper management to field workers, right? And if we don't have buy-in, we don't have foremen, superintendents, project managers actually following through and doing what the company says and following our protocols and following our policies. How do we expect our field workers, or just our, the people out there boots to the ground, how do we expect them to actually follow the same rules that we're not following, right? And it's really hard when you see, well, I'm a supervisor, and we talked about stigmas and stuff earlier. I'm a supervisor, I'm this, I'm that, and stuff like that. But it's really kind of gets incongruent when you have a supervisor not willing to follow the rules, but yet you still discipline the worker, right? So that always drove me nuts. So when we start looking at this, it's going to require teamwork from going from no miss or near miss to no miss, right? We start going through this. The old style of the reactive style, we dealt with what? Everyone in here that was safety personnel, right? We dealt with accidents, injuries, fires, and then we look at the investigations, right? And depending on what you're using, right? 5 Whys, Taproot, whatever the case may be. But we look through even though they say we don't try to associate or place blame on anyone, but I'm used to Taproot and some of those other ones where you're trying to figure out, without judging or anything, was the employee trained? Was they not trained? Did they not understand the procedure? Stuff like that. So we start going into the blame, discipline, and then a lot of times that if the individual, when you go through that process, to find out, were they trained? Okay, yes, they were trained. Did they follow the procedure correctly? And then we have to do what? Go back to the drawing table and say, hey, do we have to write up a new SOP? Because a lot of times we might have, we thought everything out, but then something happens. So we might have to go back to, and you got to be willing to do that, go back to the drawing table and then rewrite that SOP to make sure that you check for that situation. And then you look at some of the stuff that goes with that, the emotions, the stress, the guilt, the fear of reporting. How many have like a reporting system in your company that for near misses? Right, quite a bit. And it's like, I always, bless you. It's always a hard one with the near misses because we tried for a while off and on, is that we required everyone to file so many near misses in a quarter or in a week. I don't know about you guys, it kind of becomes a game. Have you guys ever seen that? It's like they're just putting near misses in just to put near misses in. And once we took the requirement off of it and just said, hey, listen, near misses, you know, and then you could do it anonymously. That's the biggest thing we did. We had a box. We had other ways, like either you could email it, but then people would go, well, you know I did it then, right, with the email address. Yeah.
Because a lot of times when it comes to that game, it's usually because of an incentive program.
Yeah, exactly.
You give us 10 near misses per week, we'll give you a $25 gift certificate.
Yeah, or you get a hoodie or get a, oh, I hear it, and it does become a game. So we took away the incentive out of all that and just get it where near misses, and we really tried to make it personal, right? And when you look at this, when you go from the old style, you know, of reactive, and then you try to go into the proactive style. One thing I did, and I'll share one little story. I got into this company. It was probably worth in the first week, and I had to do walkthroughs through. We had a fabrication department that was like 47 people, and I started going through, talking with everyone, trying to get their story, you know, how long they've been with them, and then inspecting their gear, right? And one of the things I found was we had a lot of welders, a lot of grinders going on, stuff like that, and I started examining their shields. I know it sounds little, but it's PPE, right? And PPE is at the bottom of the barrel, right? That's the least effective. So I started examining their PPE, and one of the things I found is that, for you guys that know, is there a difference between a Z87 face shield and a Z87 plus shield? The plus is high impact, right? So shouldn't my grinder guy, my welders and all that stuff, fabricators, they should have a Z87 plus shield, right? So right then and there, I said, hey, listen, you know, I'm gonna go to the tool shop, look for these shields, went, got them, came back, started replacing everyone's shields. Crew was arguing with me and they're like, hey, these are perfectly fine. I've been using these for a while, nothing's ever happened, right? Within like 4 days, I was doing my walk through the shop. One of the individuals came up to me and said, hey, thanks. I was like, wait, what's up? And I go, what'd I do? You know, first, you know, as a safety guy, I was like, what did I do? You know? And he goes, my grinder, my disc exploded on me the other day, last night, and it hit my shield, and it literally bounced off. Needless to say, he had a couple of choice words to say that he was pretty freaked out, but that saved him, you know? And it's like, instead of waiting till the time to happen and not go through that and just trying to be proactive and get out there and be with your people and, you know, trying to show them, hey, listen, this is the appropriate PPE and stuff like that, trying to take a proactive step, you know, possibly, you know, now kudos to me, I just think I was doing my job. It saved that individual from getting some shards of material in his face, right? So when we look at the proactive style, when we start looking at and trying to document those near misses, you know, unsafe working conditions, unsafe acts, and good catches. And again, that's another program we really kind of like started getting really implementing a lot, was a good catch. We even had like a little good catch book that they had. And it could be anything where, I'll give you an example. We had a truck with a bunch of material, flatbed, and the way it was loaded was very unsafe. The moment they took off the strap, it could have came down on the crew. One of the crew members stopped, said, hey, you rejected the load and stuff, and that was just, we wrote in a good catch. And I'll explain why, like, the near misses and good catches, documenting those really come into play here in a little bit. And then when you look at this and you try to get ownership and confidence and pride, and people sitting there trying to, like, I guess we call it like riding the brand, is really trying to understand what the company does, how it affects all these injuries and stuff like that, how it has an effect on the company overall. So we really tried to go through that aspect of trying to get rid of the old style where the lack of reporting, or I don't want to say anything, I'm fear for retribution, to basically going out there and you have to, it's a hard transition from the start, But once you sit there and say, hey, listen, all we're doing is trying to get information on this stuff to see what's going on, right? So then you have to build up that trust with your employees. So we look at this, and I don't know if it was you, Dale, or something, but like when we have near misses, those are gifts. Those are truly gifts because someone didn't get hurt, right? And we can learn from that as long as we can take the data in. That's the important part. Because you look at it, it's like, this is not 100% accurate, but, if you have like 300,000 unsafe acts, then it starts going up the ladder. It's only a series of time where you get to that top point, and then you have either a fatality or a recordable or reportable, right? And for mostly all safety professionals, that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to at least be proactive so we don't have any of those fatalities, right? Now, oops, sorry. Oh boy, did I go? Oh, I went the wrong way. Sorry, guys. This is just a chart that I have. Now, there's a couple different ones that I have. But basically what this is that I start putting, again, this is, somebody really kind of started teaching me how to use Excel. And I was like, oh, this is pretty decent. So I started putting all the months up on top. And this is just one of them. I started going through, and any injury that we had in our company, I would label it down over here, and I put an X on what month it was. I did this for the previous year, and then I did it for the year before that, and then the year before that. It was like a lot of grinding work going through all the old reports, right? And just looking and documenting those. What I found is that you come up with a trend. Now, not all the time, there's one-offs that happen and stuff, but what I found is, like, say, maybe in November or October, we started having a lot of vehicle accidents. Maybe in this time of year, we started getting a lot of hand injuries. So I started tracking that, and I could almost come up with a trend. I started talking to one of my other mentors, and he's like, he kind of tweaked it a little bit, and he's like, well, you can put this in there, put that in there. But the general sense is that if you can track all your incidents, whatever it is, hand injury, rolled an ankle stepping out of equipment, vehicle accident, whatever like that, and you start putting those down. And now this one, I have it where you can go in and it starts tallying stuff for you. And you can get into your whole TRIR, all that stuff. But on this, just the basic sense, it's just trying to track where you are having injuries at throughout the year. And once you go back 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and looking through that data and start putting it up there, you start to see a trend where all of a sudden, this is the time of year where we're having these kind of incidents. Well, then I started thinking, okay, what can I do about that? What can I do with this data, right? So then I started thinking, I'm like, well, I'll start doing safety meetings prior to those events, a company-wide meeting, and I will start talking about those, not necessarily naming names or anything, but I'll talk about that event, what happened, what can we do to basically mitigate those hazards, review our policies and stuff like that. And if I do that training, it was weird after the first year I did it, all of a sudden, like if we had hand injuries, and I started talking about hand injuries, and I'll tell you another step what I did, those started dropping off. We didn't see them anymore. And it was because right before that time would happen, and mostly like hand injuries, I know hand injuries are number one thing in construction and oil and gas. But if I started addressing that beforehand, pretty soon I didn't have that problem. Or I went out there and actually said, hey guys, do you need better gloves, impact resistant gloves, stuff like that. But I started watching those go off. And then one of the things that I learned that probably Dale knows too, you talk about something with your crews, right, or your workers, and you say, hey, we're going to talk about this. And in a week or 2 weeks, what happens? They forget about it, right? So one of the things I created, and again, feel free, steal any of my ideas, because most all safety people, we appropriate from other people, right? One of the things I created was Do You Know? It's a little newsletter that I sent out. Joe, I'm no writer, okay? I'm not a writer. But it would be a one-page little blip about the incidents that we had prior, and we'd say, hey, do you know our policy is this, or do you know blah, blah, blah? And I would just do a little one-pager. I put some pictures on there, keep it simple. My rule of thumb, don't make it more than one page. Because then what I do is then the foremen, supervisors out in the field, they would have to read that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we started finding out that it was refreshing in their brain. So then all of a sudden, it was like they kept on hearing about gloves, kept on hearing about gloves, kept on hearing about gloves. And it was like pretty soon, no more hand injuries. And I'm not saying that's the magical pill by any means. But to me, it was like I was just looking at how can I take this data? How can I learn from all these near misses, these good catches and stuff, and then appropriate all the training and knowledge to the employees before it happens? You know, and again, like when you look at what are the 3 deadliest months for vehicle accidents in Colorado, right? You start talking about November, December, January. So guess what? I'm hammering home driving, winter conditions. Boom, 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 boom. I'm sending out do you knows and stuff, right? And just trying to educate the employees, slow down, you know. So there's a lot of things out there we can do. Now, with this one, you can also go to this website. I was trying to figure out a different way of doing this, either take a picture of it or whatever, but it's like these guys have a lot of different spreadsheets out there on how you can track injuries, all kinds of things. I think there's 5, 6 different spreadsheets they have. So it's a good resource for us that if you're good at Excel, well, better than me, I do this. So if you're better than me, you know, you can create your own, and it really doesn't take a whole lot. But the biggest thing is that once you start tracking your injuries, you know, you're going to start seeing that when we had near misses or good catches before, now all of a sudden that's kind of disappearing, you know. And you still occasionally, you know, you get people out there, you know, writing a good catch or a near miss and stuff and filing it with you and stuff. And the biggest thing is that looking at that realistically, not just throwing it in a folder somewhere, but looking at it and saying, okay, hey, listen, going out there, talking with that employee, have them walk me through what happened and stuff. Do we have to go over an SOP or review an SOP? But if they had a near miss and stuff, and you know, you take it serious, especially from leadership, safety, foremen, project managers, whatever, take that serious, look at it and evaluate it, break it down, and see if there's anything we can proactively do not to let that happen again. Because again, when we looked at that chart, you know, those near misses, you know, those good catches, those are gold, you know. And it's like that's really, as a safety professional, that's the only way we can have the magic ball looking into the future and saying, hey, listen, if we let this just keep on going, how many near misses are we going to have until someone comes along in the right circumstance, whatever, wrong circumstance, I guess, and then someone gets injured, you know? So to me, it's like I would really strongly encourage you a lot is to start tracking your data, you know, implement some kind of good catch program. I wouldn't incentivize it by any means. We did at first, we would give like lunches and hoodies and jackets. Oh my gosh, did my office get flooded with near misses. I mean, and it was weird because after a while you get this is part of the game. I caught you walking under a suspended load, right? I'm writing a good catch. The next day, he catches me, right? And then we just keep getting all these things. So again, because, hey, we'll give the whole crew a lunch from Nordy's or something. So to me, I'd stray away from the incentivized part and just go with, you know, the honor system of just saying, hey, you catch that stuff. When you start looking at this, the challenge, fear of retribution, you know. Hey, I seen this. I'm from the oil and gas industry, okay? I've been there for like 20-some years. And I know it's shorter than others, longer than others, but it's like no one wants to say anything. It's like prying teeth out of an alligator, you know? But again, I think a lot of it for me is that I did their work before, and then I became a safety guy, and I had to slowly build up the trust. Let's say, hey, listen, you know, I really want to help you. I really want to make sure this is a lot safer for you. But, you know, they're so afraid that if they say anything or they get this where, hey, it's not my job, you know, it's your job to do that. You got to report that. No, it's everyone's job. You know, safety is everyone's job. It's not, we'll get into this a little bit where, you know, it's not just, you know, Dale's job or my job or anyone else's job just to handle safety. It's going to fall down on all of us The solution is implementing truly a confidential or non-punitive. The confidential part, I would really say yes. Because if you have to have their name attached to anything, you're probably not going to get much data, you know. But if you go anonymously and stuff, you'll see that you'll get these in, and some of them might just shock you, because there's a couple that I got and I was like, whoa. And you know, I'll have to reach out somehow, some way to sit there like, did this really happen? We need to look into this, right? And usually I'm talking to project managers and stuff like that, because I can get the gist of what happened. So, you know, look at it as a system of improvement. That's what we're always trying to do. You know, we're trying, as a safety person, you're always trying to get ahead of the incidents instead of always reacting to it, right? And reward the act of reporting, I don't mean that in like, here's $50, you know, for reporting that. I mean, show appreciation for the honesty and vigilance, either some kind of like acknowledgement from your boss, a certificate or something, saying, hey, we really appreciate that, you know, that really helped out. When you look at the mind, when we start talking about this continuous learning, beyond the act of a Band-Aid, which most of the time when we're reactionary, that's what we're doing. We're putting a Band-Aid on something. Ask why. Now again, I put this in there because, does everyone know what the 5 whys are? There's like different systems out there, right? There's 5 whys, there's Taproot, there's like probably 10 of them out there at least. Probably understating it, right? So, but just look at it, you know, why did this happen, right? You know, was it a lack of training? You know, one of the things I teach a lot of my students is that if a company constantly blames the employee and throws a noose around the employee's neck, I really look at that and say, hey, listen, did you train that employee? Were they fully understand what they were supposed to be doing? You know, were they competent at what they were doing? Because if they're not, and you just throw them in a situation, how can you blame the employee? You know, you really can't. We got to look back at ourselves and say, okay, you know what? We need to do a better job at training that employee so they understand the roles and responsibilities. Rush culture. Now listen, I ain't telling any of the safety people something new here. Do we always fight production over safety, safety over production, right? We got to get this done. We got to get it done tomorrow, brother. I mean, we don't have time for this, you know? We got to find a middle ground. We got to find a middle ground for that. You know, and a lot of times, if you talk with your employees, sometimes there's that perceived expectation of hurriness. I don't know if that's a word, but just think like, I have to get this done. Well, there's no time frame on this. Why are you rushing? You know, it's like, take your time, do it right. Well, if I do this, I can do this, I can do this. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Slow down. You're going to skip a step. You know, if you do that, or start taking shortcuts because some kind of perceived expectation, you know, and that's really kind of like, I know it's a whole nother can of worms, but talking about behavior and stuff and performance and stuff like the behavior-based safety and stuff. Audits, it's one of the things that I do a lot of recently. And does anyone else do audits out here? Great tool, isn't it? I mean, because you can get kind of a snapshot of what's going on. And it's really, I mean, nice when I don't announce when I'm going to do an audit. I show up because I've learned my lesson. If I sit there, hey, I'll be there at 8 o'clock, that place looks immaculate. And, you know, but if I just show up and I say 8 o'clock and I show up at like 11:30, and it's like, hey, I thought you were going to be here at 8. Yeah, I just want to get it, you know, I was run a little late. But I get an accurate snapshot of what's going on when you're doing audits. You know, biggest thing, gotcha. I don't know, a lot of safety people I've met, not everyone, but it's like sometimes the employees feel like you're out to get them, you know? And if you sit there and use that moment instead of the gotcha moment and have it as an educational tool and say, you know, we'll get into it. Why were you doing it like this? You know, were you trained to do it like this? A lot of times, you know, we have an SOP. And we train our employees, they expect to do it this way. But if Billy Bob over here taught them, Billy Bob's got some bad habits, right? So if Billy Bob teaches them, they might do it like this and they're not following the SOP. So to me, instead of like going, hey, listen, what were you thinking, and stuff like that, I always ask them, why? Why were you doing it like this way? You know, just show me, you know, pretend like you're doing it. What are we missing here? And then if I can whip out the SOP, say, what does the SOP say we're supposed to do right now? Well, this is how I was taught. Hey, that's fine. let's get back to what the SOP says, because to me, one of the things I always learned very early, SOPs, I imagine you guys heard this too, are written in blood, right? I don't know if you guys heard that, because if someone wasn't following SOP, we're out there doing an accident investigation or an incident investigation, right? So last part is the backbone. Biggest thing, we have to stand up. We have to basically, when it talks about leaders must not only talk, and you hear it throughout all this meetings today, right? Leaders, leaders, leaders. But I can't stress enough to you that if your upper management, your mid-management, your field management is not doing the very thing that we're supposed to be doing, how do we expect workers to do it? How we really do, And when you look at providing the necessary time, training, equipment to do job safety, so many times when I was working with this other company, we don't have the time to do that training. We don't have the time to do that training. I'm just like, well, we could do it on a Saturday. Are people willing to come in on Saturday to do the training? Well, that's going to cost us, right? I'm like, it's better that we pay this amount of money right now than when we have an incident and we're paying a lot more money, right? Sorry, I don't know if my clicker's working. Oh, there it is. So we got to look at shifting that mindset from going from reactionary, trying to track our incidents, our good catches, our near misses, and then trying to plot out our training, and trying to give at least as much education as we possibly can for our employees, right? And we go from, we can finally address that behavior, and a lot of it is like, there's good behavior, bad behavior, risky behavior, and first thing is like addressing, recognizing. One of my biggest things is trying to teach people what a hazard and a risk is, right? And you're really just trying to sit there and get honed in on trying to address that behavior. If we can try to address that behavior, we can maybe turn it around and we won't be addressing serious injuries and fatalities, right? So on this, shift in that mindset. One of the things, Dale, I love you. OSHA is what? OSHA is the bare minimum, right?
That's right.
It's the bare minimum. We could do better, right? So when we look at compliance is the floor, right? But what can we do? We can raise it up a little higher, right? So those guys out here and gals, trenching excavation, spoil pile's 2 feet away, right? Can we move it 4 feet? Can we take the spoil piles away? I mean, get rid of it, right? I mean, it's just when you look at all the standard, if you go through 1910, 1926, right? Those are the bare minimum. That's the floor, guys. I mean, we can build upon that. That's the foundation. It doesn't mean we have to be there, We can always increase it a little bit more. Ownership and accountability, this is a big thing. Safety's not Dale's. It's not your job. It's everyone's job. And one of the things I love is that, does everyone know who Mike Rowe is? Okay. If not, for younger people, dirty jobs, Mike Rowe is a beast. I love that guy. Mike Rowe had this, he had this TV show, Dirty Jobs. He got no training. He didn't know anything about OSHA, nothing. NIOSH, nothing. He would go somewhere, they would give Mike a hard hat, maybe some gloves. Now for all of us, that might not be appropriate PPE, but they gave him some PPE. And then they gave him a very rough go at it and say, here's what we want you to do, right? And Mike Rowe had this thing where, has anyone ever heard safety third? Mike Rowe, man, he can, huh?
At least in the top 5.
At least top 5, yep. That's straight from the video. Mike Rowe, he's on the Bering Sea on a crab boat. 25, 30-foot swells, climbing up the crab pots, handing them down. Anyone has ever done that? That's a scary, scary thing. And ocean's going up and down like this and stuff. And Mike Rowe at that point in time looks around. He's like, he doesn't see no signs, no safety guy or woman yelling at him what to do. And he was scared to death. He climbed down those pots. He went into the doghouse with the captain. He goes, Captain, OSHA? And Captain looked at him and he goes, OSHA? Ocean. And Mike Rowe's like, there's nothing here. I don't see no signs. He goes, listen, my job, the captain goes, my job is to make you rich. You want to get home safely? That's on you, right? And Mike Rowe goes into this thing where he goes, you go to a lot of companies, safety first, safety matters, safety this, safety that. And you get in that mindset that you're watching out for my safety. You're watching out for my safety. All these other people are watching out for my safety. So Mike Rowe, he's like, surely maybe I should have a harness on or something, tagline, anything. He's got nothing, right? So I imagine, climbing those pots, you're like, white knuckling it. But he got to that point, he goes like, listen, if I'm going to get home safely, we got to get that buy-in from the employees that safety matters. You're responsible. I'm here to tell you policy, procedure. I'll coach you. I'll do all this other stuff. But you got to take safety seriously. You got to make sure you get your home safely. I can't, and none of us, right? Sometimes we want to get in that false sense where we want to bubble wrap our employees, right? And then we want to take all the thinking out of it for them, right? But I want employees to sit there and go, doing this task, do I have the right PPE? Maybe I don't. Maybe I should need to go ask you for more PPE, right? And that's what to me, that's what I strive for. That's more proactive. When you start getting a buy-in from upper management, mid-management, and you get buy-in from the employees and stuff, and they understand if they get home, that's a win-win, I've had guys, we suggested this before, where we put your significant other's face in your hard hat. I got it from someone else. I didn't think of that, okay? But I strongly encourage all our employees to do that. And next time when someone asks you to do something pretty sketchy, I want you to take your hard hat off and look at that person. I got 3 kids now, right? I can't do stupid stuff like I did when I was 18 because they expect me to come home. I got to throw a football. I got to wrestle. I got to do all sorts of stuff. And I got to look at them and say, hey, so whatever you got to do to get that buy-in from the employees that, hey, listen, Dale, you're not everywhere. You can't be everywhere. I can't be everywhere. None of us can be at all places at all times. But basically, they are in that situation, right? So, to me, let's commit today to making sure that every near-miss experience is the last warning, right? I strongly encourage you guys, start tracking those things. Do some kind of method in there, however you want to do it. Some people may be Excel geniuses, and you can do this. But start tracking that, right? And I'm guarantee you will be a little shocked once you start going 1 year back, 2 years back, 3 years back, 4 years back, and you start seeing that trend of incidents. And when you start training ahead of those incidents, how those incidents, those near misses, go to no misses. Again, but we have to have the education to our employees. We have to give that information for them beforehand. And then I strongly encourage, if you guys are a safety person, write up some kind of little thing, some way of reminding those employees. Because when you can send it out in an email, and they could be out in a field 50 miles away, and that foreman is reading it out there to them and say, hey, just remember, hey, you guys remember last year when Billy Bob lost a finger? We started talking about that stuff and saying, this is how, we're going to prevent that from happening in the future. So to me, it's like taking that first step forward, tracking those items, doing something with that data, trying to get ahead of the curve. I don't know about you guys. I hate being behind the curve on this. It's just like it drives you nuts because I'm just going from one fire to the next fire to the next fire to the next fire. Now, granted, don't get me wrong. You're going to have one-ups come up. Certain things that happen, hey, take it with a grain of salt, look at it, see what you can do about it. But I can tell you, when you start tracking this stuff, you're going to start seeing a trend in your injuries and what time of the year. And again, you can get into, if you want to really break it down, I finally did later, AM or PM, because a lot of times, we're getting, and then you get into Monday through Friday. I started making my spreadsheet kind of crazy, but I started looking at that and seeing when was I having injuries. I can guarantee you on Friday in the afternoon, you got 1 foot on the banana peel, 1 foot out the door. Are you really thinking about the safety critical position you're in right now? So it's like trying to get workers keyed into what they're doing, and again, that kind of falls into that behavior, right? We look at making safety personal, getting the employees, get the buy-in, get everyone on board. Understanding we want to move from that reactive to the proactive. Big time tracking previous incidents, however you got to do it. Track your incidents, good catches, near misses. Some way you can track that, quantify that data, and look at it. And I'm not saying you're going to have a magic crystal ball, but it's going to show you a little bit more of what could happen this this coming year. And you can start planning for it, and you do all your training around that. From compliance to care, and then basically for our roles, looking at this, and this whole summit is amazing what we're learning, and to me it's really it does us no good if whatever we learned in this summit and leave it right up here, right? I'm horrible, I take notes down, I'm taking pictures, I'm doing all kinds of stuff. I want to take this and apply it, because I haven't been in a summit like this where I spoke to some other vendors, and it's just how people are receptive, open, friendly. Information is flowing out of here and taking all that back with us. I mean, it's going to take probably the whole weekend for me to process a lot of my notes and stuff like that, but I want to get that to my other team members. I want to get to customers that I take care of and try to pass that along. And to me, we're going to do a grave injustice if we just keep it within our heads. So with that, I think, Nick, I made it on time.
Yeah, you're ahead of schedule, so is the other room.
Okay.
So if you want to do questions, that's fine.
Yeah.
Next session after 3:10, which is in 5 minutes. Try to keep everybody ahead of schedule.
Copy that.
I love you.
Try us. Sir?
Right now, where I'm in my journey with near misses is maybe just for the sake of the folks in the room is I'm almost thinking near misses right now. My approach is stop work. So it empowers the employee that they have buy-in on safety at that moment. The one that I keep on preaching, so we're in the winter weather right now. So what I don't want to find out is that somebody slipped on the deck and then we take them to go to the clinic and then we ask the question in the investigation, who witnesses? Oh yeah, he fell over here. Okay, did anybody else see anything else? Oh yeah, like 30 minutes before, somebody else slipped there. So we should have stopped the first time and said the deck is slick. Get off the deck, let's let the ice melt off. Because you can't remove the hazard, let's just get away from it. So that 2 hours would have changed the whole dynamic on something.
Oh yeah.
Like that.
Well, just trying to get them to understand that stop work authority, it's a right and and a responsibility that what we're trying to do is like if you speak up, I mean that's all we're trying to do, right? Is you see this, we're trying to address this because listen, I don't have mongoose-like reflexes anymore. If I slipped, I'm going, and I'm old now, man. I'll break something. So to me, it's like trying to address it there before the next person comes over, like you said, hey, that happened 2 hours ago, right? And just trying to educate them, say, hey, listen, you might be quick enough, but the next person might not, and it could be where we're dealing with a fractured elbow, something like that.
Oh,
yeah.
So I've got an example for that.
Yes, sir.
To tie directly into that. I was just going through reports from one of our contractors that submitted all their reports. In the report is a incident investigation in which the individual writes up that he had stepped down off the ladder, stepped onto a piece of pipe that was laying on the floor below his ladder, and because of that, he pipe rolled, broke his ankle. Next sentence says, I told my supervisor about that pipe being there the day before.
What will happen? No action
Isn't
on
it
it.
on me then to say, wow, that piece of pipe is still in the way and I'm going up here, should I do something? He didn't take responsibility for taking care of himself because that was somebody else's responsibility to deal with that pipe.
And again, can that come down to education on that employee? Just say, listen, if you see it, you own it.
He's also blaming that on another trade.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because I'm this trade, that's the sprinkler guy's stuff. He's got to take care of it because I don't need to.
We always blamed electricians. Sorry if anyone's an electrician. So.
Well, I didn't say who was going up the ladder.
Yes, sir. Thank you for sharing that.
Risk and hazards, because there's several situations, where sometimes you can't use a proper fall protection. You're climbing into small spaces, up high, low, and it gets, it gets risky because you do a JHA or whatever you try to do, but sometimes you just can't find the safest way to do it. And that's where it becomes, is it a risk or is it, a hazard like you were talking about? So
Yeah.
we define, a little bit more on.
On risk and hazard?
Yeah.
I mean, well, best I can give you an example, everyone's had this happen. Who's been at a gas pump and someone lit up a cigarette at a gas pump? All right?
Yeah.
All the time. I know it's crazy. Now listen, nothing against smokers, okay? But have you ever gone up and addressed them and say, hey, can you put that cigarette out? I have a few times. Huh? Did you? No. I say, damn. I went up to people, like, again, this is my mindset as I evolved through this. When I was younger, I didn't care. They're idiots. They're stupid, right? When I got older, I started having kids. Kids are in the back seat. I'm a little bit more vocal. So I go up and say, hey, do you mind? Sorry, I don't want to be a jerk, but can you put out your cigarette? And please, don't put it on the ground, put it out, right? And they're like, oh, crap, I didn't even know. I'm sorry. They're usually pretty apologetic, right? But it's a habitual thing, right? But the hazard's the fuel pump, right? The risky behavior is how they're interacting. I mean, we can get into a whole bunch of stuff with complacency there because they've gotten so complacent with it where they no longer see it as a hazard. But to me, on that kind of situation, if you're looking at it, it's like if it's confined space, I hope I do you justice on this. If it's confined space, it's clearly defined on what is a confined space, what is a permit required confined space, and what do we got to do to mitigate those hazards, right? So we're talking ventilation, monitoring, all that sort of stuff, rescue teams and stuff. But to me, it's like, I've never found anything that I can't stop, think about it, get some other advice, phone a friend and say, hey, we're in this situation. Have you ever been in a situation like this? And what's the safest way to do this, right? Because to me, it's like anytime, confined spaces are a big thing for me, is that usually it's a lack of complacency or lack of following direction or looking at the standard and not following the standard on how we're supposed to address that situation. But to me, it's like, if you look at it, what is, confined space? What is this? What is a hazard? I mean, a ladder's a hazard, right? If not properly set up, not using 3 points of contact, and if I'm trying to climb a ladder with a drill or a bucket in my hand, who's that on? Then it's like I'm going to address that employee and say, hey, just time out for a second, come back down, and then explain our policy. Is teachable moment. Don't be yelling at them and screaming at them, but it's a teachable moment. Because if I yell and scream, that employee's never going to come and never listen to me again. But just say, hey, listen, I care about you, man. You got kids, right? You got the new baby, 6 months. I want to see you make it home, right? So to me, I was just really look at what the hazards are, see what the standard is, what it says, what we're supposed to be doing, and again, with your company's policy, what is the SOP for that, standard operating procedure, and follow it. And if you have any questions on that, phone a friend, get someone higher up, have them come in, I think I got to get out of here or I'm going to get in trouble, but yeah. Ooh. Sorry, guys.
Crazy, right? Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming in. My name is Don Rivkin. I'm with CRS Insurance Brokerage. So what I do at CRS is help our teams and help our clients manage loss control. So Allison was up here. Allison's part of my team. But also, my main focus is really on claims management. So my team and I help our clients manage their claims. Biggest part of what we help them manage is workers' compensation. So my background, 35 years this coming March in insurance. Can't believe it's been that long, but 35 years. Most of that was spent on the insurance company side. So I'm on the agency side now. We sell insurance. The insurance companies are the ones who actually write the policies. I spent most of my career on that side in the claims management world. So tons of experience in claims management. Really, we're focusing on return to work, and there's two different phases of return to work I want to talk about. The first is return to work when it comes to a workers' compensation claim. How do we bring someone back to work, and what's the importance of bringing someone back to work in that process? But also, how do we determine if someone's fit for duty? And that is whether you're bringing someone in as a new employee, or perhaps you have someone who's gone through maybe workers' compensation and now has permanent restrictions, and are they fit to come back to the job they were doing prior to their on-the-job injury? Or what if they have an off-the-job injury? They have an injury at home, and now they can't come back to work, and now once they do, they have some permanent restrictions, and how do we manage that? So it's kind of threefold, but the main part of this is really around workers' compensation and the importance of bringing people back to work, which most of you probably know, but we'll get in some really depth as to why. So we're going to do a quick review of workers' compensation benefits, and the purpose there is to determine what benefits under workers' compensation do you, as employers, and the insurance company have control over. Because in the state of Colorado, as many states are set up, workers' compensation benefits the employee. It's there for them. It's there for the event they get injured. We want to get them treatment. We want to get them proper benefits and get them back to work, right? That's the purpose of the system. So it's very employee friendly. Unfortunately, in some jurisdictions, in Colorado being one of them, it's not so friendly to employers, okay? So there's some tricks that we want to make sure we're aware of, and they're not really tricks, they're built into statutes, so we're not cheating anyone here, but we want to know what those are to make sure that we are taking advantage of those to really save your company some money, your bottom line, right? Insurance is expensive, I get it, so how do we manage those costs? Temporary disability, that's the main benefit we're going to talk about today. Claim costs and the financial impact of claim costs on your organization. Overcoming obstacles that you might have internally or externally as to bringing someone back to work, whether that's after a work comp injury, during a work comp injury, not even a work comp injury, does someone has a terminal illness, and how do you bring that person back? How do we overcome those obstacles? If any of you were in here with Allison, she talked about return to work program being part of the cost containment process. So we'll briefly go over what's a really good return to work program, what elements should you have in that. And then permanent restrictions, this gets into after the claim is closed, someone comes with permanent restrictions, can you still keep them employed with your organization? And those permanent restrictions may be put into place even if the person didn't have a work-related injury. Maybe something happened in their private life. And then we'll talk about fit for duty. So starting with work comp benefits, medical, that's what it's all about, right? They're injured, they're entitled to medical benefits. So medical expenses have to be reasonable and customary, meaning if I break my hand, I can't go in and they start doing stuff to my leg, right? It's obviously the hand injury, that's all we're talking about. So reasonable, if I need surgery, it's reasonable if a doctor deems it. So reasonable, customary. They are set by the state of Colorado. So any injury you can think of, there's parameters set by the state as to what the treatment regimen is. Everything from your sprains and strains all the way through surgical intervention, the state of Colorado dictates how that goes. So the doctors are really confined by what the state says. Now, it's pretty broad. They give them a lot of leeway there, but they are confined by what the state sets up. And that goes for costs as well. What you and I pay for medical treatment is a fraction of what the insurance companies, or the insurance companies pay a fraction of what we pay, because everything is fee scheduled. So if I was to go and get stitches on my own, you're probably looking at $4,000. Through workers' compensation, it's probably $1,000. So everything is fee scheduled. Everything is set in treatment guidelines by the state of Colorado. They are uncontrollable. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because in Colorado, Allison talked about designated providers. You are, as employers, able to select the doctors that your injured workers go to, at least for now. There was a statute passed. You guys probably heard about it. It's not going to go into effect until 2028. We're hopeful that it's not going to be as restrictive as it was written, because the way it's written now is it's going to give control of medical to the injured worker. Right now, you as employers have control, which is very important, because if we lose control, the employer can go to their own doctor who's going to set the restrictions, which are not going to be friendly to bringing them back to work. They're also going to set the treatment regimen, which, yes, while it's set by the state of Colorado, that doctor is going to make sure that they follow every little treatment regimen, and they're going to bill for everything they can. It can get out of control. That's why so many organizations fought this bill. So we'll see what happens with that. But they're very much right now controllable by you, because you can send them to the doctors that you chose as your designated providers. What's uncontrollable is you as an employer can't go back to the doctor and say, hey, instead of surgery, can we just do physical therapy? You cannot intervene in the medical process. You can make suggestions, but if you start trying to dictate treatment, and if you have a doctor who gets put off by that, they could file a complaint with the state of Colorado and you could get fined. So I'll get a lot of questions from our clients is, this guy's been treating forever, can't we step in? Can't Pinnacle step in? Can't somebody do something? And my answer is always, as long as the doctor is following the treatment guidelines set by the state of Colorado, no, we cannot. The doctor rules. So that's what I mean by it's uncontrollable. We really can't control that element. Also something to note, if a claim is on denial, so let's say the claim sounds suspect, your insurance company says, we're denying the claim, we don't think it's compensable, they still have to pay reasonable medical. So that's how uncontrollable it is. Medical, you just can't touch. You'll see where I'm going with this once we get to temporary total disability benefits. Death benefits, funeral burial expenses now $12,500 up to that amount. There's also dependent support, so 66 2/3% of the average weekly wage of the decedent goes back to dependents if they qualify. And then if they do not have dependents, there is the Colorado Uninsured Employer Fund, which pays out $25,922.50 as a one-time payment, and then the claim closes. So I'm just mentioning this as another benefit that's uncontrollable. If you do have, God forbid, an injured worker that does pass, those are the benefits, and those are stated by law. There's really nothing we can do about them. Permanent disability. So there's two types of different disability, temporary and permanent. When someone's deemed permanent, it's either permanent partial or permanent total. Permanent total means they can no longer work ever again. It's rare. Now, it's in the cases of quadriplegic, paraplegic, that's where you're going to see a lot of perm totals. You may see someone who's aged out of the workforce who becomes a perm total because they have no transferable skills. That's getting more and more rare. What you're most likely to see when a claim is concluding is a permanent partial disability. And that's when the doctor assesses what's called an impairment rating. So let's say I break my leg and I have surgery. I now have a limp. I now cannot extend that leg the way I used to. The doctor's going to say, okay, that lower extremity has a 20% disability, and I'm going to get money for that. I could also get money, what's called a whole person disability. Typically, if you have a back injury, that's going to be a whole person disability, meaning that as a person, I'm now 10% disabled, and I'm going to get a payment for that. Those are uncontrollable. We can try to fight them, but you typically aren't going to win. In fact, if you try to fight it, what's usually going to happen? They're going to give them more disability. So if you go ahead and file a division independent medical exam and say we don't agree with that permanent impairment, typically the doctors know you're right. He should have 15% instead of 10%. So very uncontrollable. It kind of just has. It's part of the system. It's part of the benefits. Then we talk about temporary disability. So temporary disability is split up into two different sections, temporary partial or temporary total. Temporary total and temporary partial are controllable. This is where we can control our expenses in workers' compensation claims. So out of all those benefits I just listed, this is it, right? This is where we want to focus all of our efforts, which is why you're in here today. So let's talk about temporary disability. What is it? Physician orders restrictions. So injured worker comes in. 99.9% of the time when an injured worker visits one of your designated providers, they're going to say you have some type of an impairment. Right now, you cannot lift more than 50 pounds. You cannot push-pull more than 40 pounds. You cannot climb ladders. You cannot stoop. You cannot bend. You cannot crawl. Whatever the restrictions might be. Once that doctor orders restrictions, your injured worker is now eligible for temporary disability. It's paid at 66, yes, sir.
I don't know if this is something you can answer to that, but if there's a job site where there's a hired team of paramedics, the paramedics, not a physician, is who orders restrictions. Is that still a restriction that we have to follow and OSHA recordable, or?
I can answer that, and the answer is no. It's the same as if they go to an emergency room. So let's say you have an emergency situation. Can't get to the designated medical provider, but they go to the ER, or they go to an off-site urgent care. Typically, or the paramedic, they're going to say, yeah, don't work for 2 weeks. Invalid. Your next course of action is, as soon as that injured worker comes back, you say, you are now going to one of our designated providers and starting the process from there. But certainly you are allowed to let that injured worker go and get immediate care. Your insurance company has to pay for it. It's fee scheduled, but they have to pay for it. But then you get them right back into the designated provider program. Next visit. That's where you want to get that process going again. So then we can get the physician-ordered restrictions that you're bound by. But if an ER doctor says off for 2 weeks, we're not following that. We're going to get you to the designated provider. They're going to set realistic restrictions.
Where we run into that is where a GC is brought in an outside EMT to handle any injury that occurs
Sure.
on the job site. And then the EMTs have restricted what the worker can do.
Yeah, it still goes back to your designated provider.
Yeah, if you take them into the designated provider and get a letter from them and take it to that GC, they have no letter.
Right. Yep, good question though.
Real quick, we keep saying designated provider. If you're a business owner, do you have a designated provider? Okay. I just wanted
I hope I see everyone shaking their, yes. Do you have at least 4 of them? Okay. And that's a whole nother discussion. We could talk about that process because the state has mandated how that works as well. So great questions, thank you. Temporary disability is paid at 66 2/3% of average weekly wage, not of their current wage. Average weekly wage, they take, let's say your employee's been with you 3 years. They're going to go back maybe a year, maybe 2 years, because what they're looking for is overtime. That's the biggest one, right? Not just your hourly rate. So they're going to calculate and say, okay, on an average, you've been making this per week. So average weekly wage is paid at 66 2/3%. Anyone know why it's not 100%? Right. It's paid gross, right? So it's not taxed. So it's kind of take that 33% out for taxes, right? Unfortunately, you would think if you pay them less, it'll get them back to work faster. Typically what we're seeing is people are getting paid a little bit more than if it's taxed. So 66 2/3%, that's basically the tax offset. Typical restrictions you're going to see, again, weight restrictions, lifting, pushing, pulling, things like that. That's the most common one. Movement, range of motion, seated, standing, crawling, climbing. And then time, how many hours could they work? Oh, you can still work 8 hours a day, but you can't lift more than 40 pounds, you can't crawl, climb. Or they may say you can only work 4 hours a day, right? Restrictions that you're going to have to follow then. Driving restrictions, be careful with this one. Some may say no commercial driving. Some may say no driving at all. No driving at all means if you want them to come to a return to work assignment, you might have to pay for them to get to work. Uber, whatever it is. If it's just commercial driving, they can get in their own vehicle and drive. I never quite understood the difference, because if you can't drive a commercial vehicle, why can you drive your personal vehicle? But whatever, if you're going to say commercial only, great. Not a driver, doesn't matter. They can still come to a return to work assignment. The old dreaded no work restriction. So this one drives me crazy, because the way I look at it is there's always something somebody can do, right? Let's say you have surgery. Okay, maybe for a couple days after surgery until the meds wear off and such, yeah, you're probably pretty much incapacitated. But at that point, even if you're sitting at home, there's got to be something they can do, right? So we've been looking more and more into alternative solutions to that, and we'll get to that in a moment. There's the second one, can't or won't meet the restrictions. And this goes back to you as employers. Those restrictions, you know, he's up on scaffolding all day long. He says no climbing. We have nothing for him. Or we don't want them back. All right, so we have solutions for both of those issues. Now, temporary partial disability is any time you pay an injured worker less than their average weekly wage on a return to work assignment, your insurance company is going to pay the difference under temporary partial disability. And this one gets tricky when you have someone who comes back to work and you said, I'm not going to pay this guy who's usually up on scaffolding to sit in the office and shred paper all day long. Don't use it as a return to work, by the way. The plaintiff's bar hates it. But you want meaningful work. So let's say they're doing office work. I'm not going to pay them to do office work when they're usually up on a scaffolding. Okay, and that's very legit. Right? So I either can't or I won't pay them full wage. Well, that's fine. Just understand then that your insurance company is going to pay the difference under partial disability. Or restricted hours, right? So you can't. Right. Well, we'll get to that. This is where this is all going, right? Yep, this is where it's all going. So restricted hours is another one. That's another reason why you might not want to pay them their full average weekly wage. So even if they're not working 8 hours a day, you're going to hear from me shortly that pay them their average weekly wage, and there's a reason for that. And here they come, right? Financial implications. Everyone know what your EMOD is? Does anyone not know what their EMOD is? Okay. EMOD is a factor that's built in to assess insurance rates. It's basically looking at your loss history over a 3-year period of time. And it's basically saying if you are a 1, number 1, you're average with every other company, your same size, same type of work. I'm putting this in really general terms. If you're over a 1, you're paying more. If you're under a 1, you're paying less. So where do we want to be? Way under a 1, right? We want to keep it low. So anytime a claim is placed on your loss runs from the insurance company, those get submitted to a company called NCCI who calculates your EMOD. And it's done every year, and it's a 3-year running, the last 3 years, right? So it's 3 years of losses, and it's going to set a number. So our goal is to keep that number as low as possible. Well, the more claims you have, and the higher dollar amount those claims are, the adverse effect is going to kick that mod up over a 1. Which in turn, you pay more in insurance costs, right? More in your insurance premiums. Because the EMOD is really what sets your insurance premium. You have a baseline, and then anything below it's going to take away from the baseline. Anything above a 1 is going to add to that baseline. So we want to take more money off of your premium than add it on. It also could have effect on future business. Does anyone know what I mean by that? Ashley knows what I mean by that. Right. Exactly.
The federal government's giving out
Are they really? Yeah. I wrote 3 letters this morning explaining high E-mods for my clients so they can give them to their general contractor pre-quals that they're working on right now. So if you guys ever have that situation, we can write letters trying to explain away a mod. I've gotten really creative on that. ChatGPT helps too, but I've gotten really creative on how we can try to make you guys look better, right? I call this short-term pain for long-term gain, okay? What we're going to talk about here going forward. Think about that. Short-term pain, right, for long-term gain. Keep that in mind. And keep in mind, any loss that goes on your E-mod is there for 3 years. So that's where the long-term pain can kick in. Don't stop there. Okay. So what are some of the obstacles? The no work restriction, we talked about that, the dreaded no work. More and more insurance companies are turning to home-based light-duty options. One of them is called light-duty pathways. This is one that Pinnacle's instituted recently. What that is you give the person a laptop. They have them in Spanish, they have them in English. The person has a laptop, and they do all kinds of safety training, all kinds of stuff, computer-based. The other is charitable not-for-profits. There's one company that one of my clients works with that they do non-sew blankets. So they're like these felt blankets, they just kind of tie things together, and they produce a bunch of them. And it sounds crazy, but we've been successful at going back to the doctors and saying, hey, doc, I know you said no work, but what if we gave him a laptop and he's sitting at home and they're just looking at safety training? Oh, sure, they can do that. Takes away from the no work restriction. If you are a Pinnacle client, Pinnacle has return to work specialists. They will help you look for alternatives such as these. If you're not with Pinnacle, talk to your agent. They should be able to talk to you because most other carriers have these options. They're just not as aggressive as Pinnacle with the return to work specialists. But most of them have the options. If not, we have contacts to get to them. We have nothing for them to do. Well, great. Then let's send them to maybe a not-for-profit. Have you ever thought about that? Send them to, the biggest one right now Pinnacle's using is ARC. ARC loves volunteers. So they go there, as long as it's within their restrictions, they could be folding clothes, they could be helping doing checkout, whatever tasks are acceptable by the doctor, they can do. Now, you're paying them to do that, right? But it's better than paying them through the work comp system to sit at home and watch Frank Azar commercials all day long. Task building assistance, talk to your insurance company, talk to your broker. We get really creative on finding tasks, either in or outside of your operations.
John, do these other tasks that are not work-related, do they have positive impact or negative impact to the employee themselves?
Such as the not-for-profits?
Yeah, like, is it more motivational? Does it cause issues with mental wellness?
So anytime you bring someone back to work, there's studies out there that show that it's very beneficial. 1, they heal faster. 2, mentally, they feel at least productive, right? They're doing something rather than just sitting at home. Think about someone who has a legitimate injury, right? And is devastated they can't go to work. How am I going to feed my family? What if I can't go back to work ever again? The more we can reinforce positively by bringing them back to something productive, the better off they're going to be. Recovery is shown to be faster. They're less likely to have a psych component to their claim. We're seeing more and more of this. When someone goes in for an injury, some of the first questions they ask is, how are you feeling? If they say, I'm depressed, they're going to send them for psych treatment right out of the gate because they're going to say there's a correlation between the injury and now they're depressed. So now the depression's creeping and we're going to treat that as well. And that has been deemed as compensable. So if they feel more productive, if they feel more active, they're going to heal faster and you have less opportunity for a psych component. So yes, it is very beneficial. We've got great feedback from the folks who do the not-for-profits because they feel they are really giving back, they're doing something, And it used to be, you know, when we look for tasks, it was like, okay, we have all these paper clips. Let's have them sort them. Large paper clip, small paper clip. That's really, you can do it. If that person has an attorney, they're probably going to file an application for hearing with the state of Colorado and say this is abusive. They shouldn't be doing this. And we've seen those get overturned. So you got to be careful about the tasks you give them. It should be meaningful work. Again, working with return to work specialists, both on building tasks or any type of alternative methods. If you are with Pinnacle, if you don't know how to access your return to work specialist, just ask your adjuster. Say, can we get a return to work specialist involved? It's a whole separate department. That's all they do is work on return to work options. Again, if you're not a Pinnacle client, talk to your broker. If you're a CRS client, myself, Allison, Marco, my claims team, we know exactly where to go, what to look for, how to get good tasks put in place, how to get people in touch with the light duty pathways or with an ARC or such. And then the old, we don't want them back, right? This is another one that's great for not-for-profit, and I understand this, right? So if you have someone who's coming in the office and they're disruptive because they've had an injury and they're not a positive person and they're just bringing everyone else down, or other employees who come in and out of the office see this field employee sitting in the office and they start thinking, I'm just going to get hurt and sit in the office all day long. So if you want to get that element out of your workforce, think about alternative methods. And again, one of those being that not-for-profit placement. All right, Allison went over some of these, so if you sat through her session, some of this might be a little redundant, but identify a coordinator for your return to work program. Someone should be managing that. If you have too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen, things can get confusing. So we want to make sure we have someone who's coordinating it. Have a formal policy in place. Obviously, if you're cost-contained certified, you already have this in place, but now look at it and use it. Partner with your designated medical providers. And what I mean by that is they're vendors of yours, right? You can basically fire them, hire them, however you want to manage them. But an important thing about managing a designated medical provider is setting protocols with them. So letting them know that, hey, we have an aggressive return to work program. Now that designated provider, when one of your folks gets injured and comes in, they're going to automatically know, okay, we're going to keep some restrictions here. We're not going to give the old no work, right? Because now we know ABC company, they are going to bring them back in some form, or some shape or form. You can even give them a list of tasks. So that doctor is already thinking ahead and saying, yep, you can do this, 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 and this. And they fill out a form, this is really important, and they approve these tasks. And on day one, they hand it to your employee, and they say, give this to your employer. And they hand it to you, and that starts the process of the Rule 6. And we're going to talk about the Rule 6 in a moment and the importance of getting the doctor's buy-in with the Rule 6. So if they're already doing that, we're already 3 steps ahead of the process. So partner with your designated provider, set protocols. If you want more on how to do that, you'll have my contact information. I'll share all kinds of good stuff with you on how to set those protocols. Partner with your insurance company. Obviously, if you're working with Pinnacle, whoever your insurance company is, work with those adjusters. They're there for you. You're paying the premium, make them work for you. Same thing with your broker or your agent. The resources they have available, take advantage of them. And be consistent in your program. Do as you will for one for all. You don't want to get yourself in a discrimination situation, okay? Okay, so we talked about identifying the coordinator, just developing those modified duties, having all that job bank, coordinating and managing the transitional work assignments. So this is really important if you are using your not-for-profits, that you build a relationship with that not-for-profit. Because they're going to be communicating with you directly, not with the insurance company, about yes, they showed up, here's what you have to pay them, here's how many hours they worked. So you want to have that relationship. Same thing with your designated medical providers, your claims representatives. Having that designated person in the office makes it much smoother. They know who to contact. That person usually becomes an expert within your organization on how the whole process works, what questions to ask. Clarify the work restrictions. So if the supervisor comes in and says, hey, he's been lifting more than 50 pounds. Okay, let's have a sit down. You have to stay within your restrictions. Just making sure that things are going in the right direction. And then just facilitating the overall process. Develop a written policy. Make sure it's approved and supported by management. Ensure it's communicated and understood by all employees. So if you are just doing this, make sure your employees know we have a policy in place. That's going to be important because now they know, oh, I can't play games with these guys. They have a formal return to work policy. Man, the last place I was at, they didn't care. They just sent me home. That should happen in new hire orientation. The employee signs off on it, obviously. And then review periodically with your employees, especially if there's changes to the program and such. They are required for Colorado cost containment, as Allison reviewed. Okay, and we talked about the importance of partnering with your designated medical providers. You want them that are supportive of return to work, explaining your return to work program, setting tests, even if you have them come out and visit your facilities. And you say, hey, here's what we have. And they start looking around your operations, say, oh, here, we can have them do that, or we can have them do this. Or they get an understanding of what your people are doing on a regular basis. This really works well for manufacturing facilities. I don't know if you want a doctor walking around on job sites. If they do, Allison will go out with them. Provide physicians with functional capacity forms, modified duty, job descriptions. So having all that upfront paperwork done, and again, reach out and we can help you with that. A lot of this we already talked, so just want to blow through it here. And really important, at the time of the injury, send a written reminder to the provider. So if they're going to see the doctor, have something that goes to the doctor that says, this is where we're from, and we have modified duty available. It should be in their system, but it gives a nice little reminder to the doctor that you are proactive about it. Generally speaking, that restrictions short of complete bed rest can be accommodated. Challenge the no work restriction, and you can do that. You can say, hey, we have stuff for them to do. Now the doctor may say, no, I don't want them doing anything. Okay, we just thought we'd ask. Have your carrier do that. They will send a letter. They can't call them, but they will send a letter saying, here's things that the employer can do. Can we try to release the restrictions? Typically, the doctors are pretty flexible on it. And then partnering with your insurance or agency resources, such as the claims adjusters, your return to work specialists, lean heavily on them if you're a Pinnacle client. Agency risk services department like Allison and I, and then be consistent. Talked about enforcing it equally, set the employee expectations, and always follow through on them, right? So, hey, this is how this is going to work, and don't flex away from it, because as soon as you start getting flexible, that's where things can get a little loose, and someone can say, hey, I wasn't treated the same way as that person was. Build a sense of pride with the goal of 0 days off. So getting that safety culture built in that, hey, we are here to be safe. We're here to get you the treatment you need should you be injured, but we also want to bring you back. We don't want you to have to sit at home. We want to bring you back and be productive. So our goal is to have 0 days off, right? So even if you are injured, we want to bring you right back in. So how do we bring them back? 2 ways. Verbally. What's your name? Sean. Hey, Sean, I know you were hurt yesterday. Come on into the office tomorrow. We got stuff for you to do. Sean says, all right, cool. Sean shows up. Everything seems to work fine, right? We pay him. Pinnacle doesn't have to pay him. Great. Claim closes. Everything's good. Sean decides not to come to work and says, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sit at home. Pinnacle will start paying him. Even though we have stuff for him to do, even though we say, hey, no, we can bring him back, Sean can make that choice because we're on a verbal. And he can say, I don't want to do that. And he doesn't have to. We have no leverage. So that means that that temporary total disability is going to start paying out his average weekly wage. The advantages of a verbal, it's simple, it's fast, it's flexible, right? And if you have an injured worker that has a minor injury, typically it works out fine. Disadvantages, there's no protections in the event of non-acceptance or non-compliance. They can do whatever they want. They kind of rule it. process, basically you just say, hey, come on back to work. We have stuff for you to do. And then you send a letter to your insurance company and you say, here's what we're having them do. We're paying them regular pay. And the problem with this is you have to then send to the insurance company every week the hours and the pay that that person incurred. So he worked 8 hours this week, was paid X, here's the hours. And if that fluctuates at all from the average weekly wage, they're going to pay the difference. So you're going to have to show, and you're going to have to prove it every week on a verbal that they are being paid at least the average weekly wage.
So question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we do for signatures and stuff, we have apps on our phone, and that's how we do it. So if we did a verbal, and we told the employee, just like what you said, he's supposed to come in the next day, but he did it. But if I had the conversation with them today, well, hey, you're coming in today, and then I'm going to send over a form that you're going to be here, and this is what you're going to be doing for your restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
Have him sign it that day, but then if he doesn't show up the following day, you said that the insurance is going to pay for that time off. But if I have that document saying that the previous day that he was supposed to be here,
Oh, they'll still pay him.
they'll still pay him.
Oh, even if he signed off and said, sure, I'll be there. Because that's not a requirement. That is just something you have to send to the company, the insurance company, and say, we've brought him back to work, we're paying him, and they're going to say, great, congratulations, that's awesome. But every week we need you to send his pay records, because we need to make sure you're paying him his full average weekly wage, because he's on restriction by his doctor. And if you're not, then we got to make up the difference, right? So the paperwork in a verbal is useless.
So at what point then does unapproved leave or we're paying you your PTO until your PTO runs out?
And you can do that. You certainly can. As long as it's...
We can automatically go to that.
Yes.
And then that would be what the documentation is that goes to.
Yep. You're just showing that you paid them. As long as you're showing that you paid the average weekly wage, they're fine with it. Now, typically they're like, we really want them coming back to work. Because I've had clients that will pay them to sit at home, and Pinnacle's found out about it, and they're like, you got to be careful with that. If they get an attorney, they're going to go after benefits. And I've seen them get double paid because they're not doing something. They're sitting at home, and they're going to say, you weren't working, pay them. And Pinnacle has to pay them on top of what you already paid them. So you got to be really careful with that one. The sick time, yeah. Hey, I don't feel good today. Great, take a sick day. We'll still pay you. But if they're saying it's related to the on-the-job injury, and I'm not doing that. I'm not going to sit in the office. All right. You could try not to pay him, but as soon as he talks to his adjuster and says, I'm not working. Oh, you're not working? And they call you, is he working? Nope. Have you paid him? Nope. They're going to start paying him. Okay. How do we fix that? Right here. You make all of your return to work offers, other than the minimal one. If you have someone that you trust, that everything's going smooth, that's fine. However, if you have someone who has a pretty good injury that you know is going to take a little while to play through the system, I highly recommend you get the return to work formalized. So a written formal program, basically the advantage of it are the Rule 6, which is in Colorado law, rules of procedure. What it is, it's a wage loss termination. So when it's done correctly, all the paperwork gets sent to the state of Colorado, and it basically terminates temporary total disability benefits. So the carrier's like, cool, we don't have to manage that. The state says, great, it's a medical-only claim. Okay, a couple advantages there. One, medical-only claims on your EMOD have less of an impact than a lost time claim. So there's codes. This would be a code 6 as medical only. You're going to get a slight discount because that person is back at work. Okay? So the Rule 6 process, basically with the state, they're saying, oh, there's no lost time here. So it's very formal. There's defined parameters. You're basically giving this person a new job. And you're saying, while you're on restricted duty, this is what you're going to do. This is when you're going to be here. This is when you can go home. This is what you're going to get paid. These tasks that we're listing on the job offer have been approved by the doctor, because that's step one. It goes to the doctor. Doctor says, yep, He can do all that. Great. Then you send him the formal offer. Your doctor said you can do this. Here's when you start. Here's what you're going to get paid. Doesn't have to sign it. You just send it off. So let's say he decides not to show up. I'm not doing that. I didn't sign anything. Great. Don't pay him. Treat him like any other employee. 3 no-call, no-shows, you're terminated. However you treat any other employee, you can now treat this injured worker because they are now under the Rule 6, meaning temporary total disability benefits are off the table. They have a new job through the Rule 6 job offer. If they decide not to show up, you don't pay them. And Pinnacle's not going to pay them, or your carrier's not going to pay them because those lost wage benefits have been terminated with the state. So there's great protection if they decide not to accept, or if they decide to be non-compliant. They start playing games with you. They show up one day, they don't show up the next day. And you only pay him the days he's there, or she's there.
Who files that with the state? Is the insurance?
The insurance company, yes. Disadvantages of the formal, it's a very structured process. If you don't follow it to the letter of the law, an attorney will eat it up and it'll be terminated. So there's a very structured process. Again, that's why working with a return to work specialist, they do this all day long. They do all the work for you. All you say is, hey, I want to bring her back on to Rule 6. Great. What tasks do we have for him? Here's the task. Great. I'll send it to the doctor. So what they have to do is they have to send a letter to the doctor and to the injured worker and the injured worker's attorney if represented at the same time. Now, they drop them in the mailbox at the same time or the email. It has to be date stamped the same date. Comes back, great, approved, formal offer letters drawn up. I hand it to the injured worker. You start in 3 days. I mail it to the injured worker. You start in 7 days. So if you can, hand it to them. And they may already be working there, right? So you just say, hey, we're formalizing your return to work. 3 days, this kicks in. Or it's 7 if you mail it. If the process is not filed, it can be overturned. I have seen applications for hearing filed where, again, the plaintiff's bar eats it up and the judge says, nope, start over. So we want to try to stay away from that. But I highly recommend utilizing the Rule 6. It's one of the few things we have in the state of Colorado that I preach on taking advantage of. It's so powerful. Okay, any questions on that? Yes. Awesome.
I'll start slowly.
Okay, perfect.
The return to work program, can you set a time limit? So let's say we do have something for them to do. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, no improvement, everything's the same, and they're working at our location.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? 60 days, 90 days of him doing this, now we're gonna go have him do some volunteering. Can you put a time frame on? We only have 30 days of you to do work restriction at the office. After that, it's voluntary.
I'm going to answer that 2 ways. One, on a verbal, sure, do whatever you want as long as they're showing up and you're paying them his average weekly wage. You can fluctuate. That's why I said it's flexible, right? You can do whatever you want when it's on a verbal. If it's on a Rule 6 and you're going to change tasks, that would have to go back to the doctor. Doctor would have to approve those new tasks, and then you'd have to give them a new formal offer saying, here's the things you're going to be doing for the next 30 days. The way to prevent that is be really general in what you do from a Rule 6. Hey, you may be doing this, 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 and this, or you may be doing this, this, and as long as the body movement tasks are approved by the doctor, you're cool there. The doctor's going to be like, yeah, you can do all those things. It's what you put into the offer letter that you may be working at ARC. I'd probably stay away from that. If it's internal and you're just changing what they're doing internally, you're okay with just a general Rule 6. But if you're going to move them off site, you'd have to do a new one.
But then what happens when their job restrictions change? So let's say first appointment, job restrictions was 20 pounds. Second appointment, job restriction is now 10 pounds. So we have to...
Nope. If they go down, you don't have to do anything. It's only if they go up. So let's say they go from 20 to 50 because they have a worsening of condition. At that point, your return to work specialist is going to go, oh, we need to send a new task letter to the doctor just to confirm that what he approved on the 20-pound restriction still applies to the 50.
Second question.
Mm-hmm.
FMLA, when they start on any work restriction, do you start FMLA?
No. Nope. And I did have a client who used FMLA as his return to work. If you don't return in 12 weeks, you're fired, which I don't recommend, by the way. It was horrible. He had the worst lost time. Oh my gosh, his claims were so high. He's like, I don't care. I'm not paying anyone to sit in my shop. I'll let the insurance company pay him, and he's on FMLA. Don't do it.
And then the EMOD, is there a way to see exactly what they're taking into consideration? So you can see on your EMOD is .80.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we took into consideration.
Yep.
In 2025, your EMOD was .70. This is what we took into consideration.
Sure can.
How?
Have you ever seen your EMOD worksheet?
I have.
Okay. You want more detail than that, right? Has anyone explained it to you?
Maybe I don't, maybe I don't understand.
Yeah, you just need someone to sit down and say, okay, this is what all these factors mean. It gets really technical. It's like all these formulas, but the main things you have to consider on your EMOD is your payrolls and your losses. Well, and of course your class codes, right? So class codes payroll is going to dictate your expected losses. If you're over your expected losses, you're going to get dinged. If you're below your expected losses, you still might get dinged, just not as much. And there's factors that are built in and weightings, and that's a whole nother discussion. Give me a call. We can talk about it. I love talking about that stuff. All right, permanent restrictions. So someone gets to maximum medical improvement. You guys all know what that means? We're okay, right? All right. 4:04. I've got a minute, Allison. Okay, permanent restrictions. So when someone's at maximum medical improvement, it does not necessarily mean they're 100%. What that means is you're as good as you're going to get. So they might have some type of a permanent restriction. There's two types of different permanent restrictions. They may have the impairment rating. We talked about this, where it's just a body part impairment or it's a whole person impairment. There's also another permanent restrictions where they say, hey, you can no longer lift more than 50 pounds ever. So this might change what you have available for this person to do, right? So this is going back to, is this person, after this claim has closed out and now he has permanent restrictions, are they still fit to do the job you hired them to do? What are the physical requirements of the job at the time of the injury? I hope everyone in this room has job descriptions that have physical requirements in the job description. So when someone gets hired, that employee knows, oh, I have to be able to lift 50 pounds or more. Oh, I have to be able to climb ladders. I have to be able to stoop, bend, crawl. Whatever the physical requirements are of the job they're being hired for, you should have those in the job description. That's really important. Because when it comes to this point, if they're there, then we can go through it again and go, now the doctor says you can only lift 20 pounds. I don't know if we can accommodate you. Now this can get tricky with ADA, okay? But that's only going to come into effect is if, one, the person makes a disability claim and says they want an ADA compliance from you, right? So you're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, as your current job, we can't bring you back doing that. And they're going to say, well, what else you got for me? Because now I'm disabled. Okay, do you have to make a reasonable accommodation for them? Typically, you're not going to have to if it's cost prohibitive to the organization or if it's going to disrupt your normal operations. But if you do have stuff available, if you have an open job that's in the office, you pretty much probably have to give that person an opportunity to apply for that job. But if there's nothing available, there's nothing available. So again, looking at open positions, are there any physical requirements that might restrict that person from doing it? If not, I would let them go through the application process for the open position. Again, ADA compliance. Reasonable accommodation unless it will cause undue hardship. Too difficult, not cost effective. You can make all kinds of arguments to that. And it's only if they really come in and say, I am going to file a disability claim, I'm disabled, I still want to work here, what do you have for me? Reassignment to new positions only if available. Modifying work schedules, I mean, there's all kinds of things that can come into play. No significant modification to essential job functions. So these are things you have to think of when, will a reasonable accommodation cause undue hardship? Do I have to modify work schedules? Could that be cost prohibitive? Do I have to do something different to what our job functions are here that are cost prohibitive? Yes?
So if they have to apply for like the new position you put them in, is there any red flag or not a good idea to change their wage if their field wage was higher than what their office position would be?
If you already have that position available and it's posted at a different job band, you certainly could drop them into that band. You got to be careful there, though. It could be just say, hey, here's what we have available. Do you want it or not? It doesn't pay what your other job was paying.
Right.
You don't.
$35 out.
Right.
And then if you have a receptionist, it's like that's a $22.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And leave it up to them. It's if you bring them into the office and say, yeah, we're going to bring you in, we're going to keep you, but we're going to cut your salary. Let them make the choice. Here's what we have available. You're going to go through the application process like everyone else. You're applying for a new job, but here's what it pays. Okay? Yep. Okay, so fit for duty. A couple different ways we figure out if people are fit for duty or you may want to. One is pre-employment. I have a whole seminar I do on how to bring people in and different methods you can do when what I call it is like, hey, understand who you're hiring. Because I've seen horror stories of people come in, they say, yeah, I can do that. I can do all those physical requirements. And then you find out as soon as you hire them, they had back surgery last year. And all of a sudden now he has a back claim that we're paying for. So there's ways to figure this out. But one of those is pre-employment physicals, right? So you can send them to, most of your designated providers will do pre-employment physicals. You basically send the person for the physical with a copy of their job description with the physical requirements. And they run them through a gamut of tests mirroring what they're going to do on the job. Lifting certain weights, climbing, crawling, and then the doctor's going to sign off on a form and they're going to say yes or no, whether they can do the job that they're potentially being hired to do. Now you can only do this after you've hired them on conditional offer. So there's two ways to hire someone. You just hire them and say, yeah, you start tomorrow. Or you hire them with a letter that says, your employment is conditioned upon you passing a drug test, passing your criminal background test, passing our pre-employment physical. So if you're not doing that and you want more information on that, reach out to me. I've got all that information on how you go about with a post-hire pre-employment conditional offer of employment. On your application, when someone's applying, you can have a simple question. Can you meet the physical requirements of the job you're applying for? Yes or no. You can't ask why, but you can ask that question, yes or no. You can do a medical questionnaire after they've been hired, but before they start working, so that pre-employment phase. And again, we talked about pre-employment physicals. Non-work related injuries or illness. I always say get a release from the doctor. We're not going to make that determination. I'm not going to pay to make that determination. I'm leaving it up to you, injured worker. You got sick or you were injured, I'm sorry. We'd love to have you back, but I need something from your doctor that says you can still meet the physical requirements of your job. If they have any type of, again, permanent restriction, that might apply. If they don't meet them, if they have any same process you would go through even if it was a work-related injury. Do we have other open positions? Are they going to try to make an ADA claim? Keep those issues in mind as well. And then you could always send them for a post-injury or a post-illness physical. I would not take on that cost. I would say go and get a physical or just have your doctor sign off on it. That's what I got. Any other questions? I want to leave it open. I know we're pushing Friday evening, but any other questions? If you do, or if you think of on the ride home or whatever, please give me a call, send me an email. I'm always available to help you out. I don't care if you're a client or not. We're all in this together. So reach out. I'm certainly here to help you. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it.